All right, we're on.
But you have to lean into it.
Okay. Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals public hearing for September 7th, a public review session, for September 17, 2019. We'll begin the appeals calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, 2019-89A, 36 West 66th Street, Manhattan. This is the appeal brought by City Club.
Right, so we're going to do these separately, correctly?
I must recuse.
Yes, okay, right, sorry. Okay, this case was closed, and so as I said, we're going to do these two applications separately and vote just on this one, okay? The question presented in this application is whether the mechanical space is limited as to height by the zoning resolution. I believe that that identical question was asked and answered in the Sky House case on East 30th Street, so there's no need to look at it again, and my position on the issue hasn't changed. I'm saying that in part because I use the term issue precluded, and that is used in a different, it's sort of a term of art. This is about asked and answer. A question's already been asked and answered, and no reason to change position, no difference in facts or questions that would cause me to want to change position. The second question has to do with bulk distribution, and I think the text is clear that it applies to all zoning lots in the special district. So just on that case. So other comments on that case?
No.
Anybody else?
No, I share the same opinion.
Okay.
I just want to add, I can certainly understand the frustration.
Can you
The mic,
speak up
please?
and pull the mic to you?
I can certainly understand the frustration that the community has on this case, because I'm very frustrated with the result here as well. There is even looking at the model, the 3D model that was brought in by one of the speakers, it's clear that this building does not conform with the neighborhood. That being said, I agree with the chair. I don't believe that. What are we looking for? Oh, sure. And I don't believe that the language in the resolution permits us to look behind anything else, as it is clear and unambiguous. And for us to do so would be stepping outside of what our mandate, and we're not the body to decide whether or not the legislation, how it should be written. We're just interpreting what is written.
I believe last hearing the chair made it clear that our job as a board is not to write laws or write zoning resolution. Our job is to just apply it. And I hope the majority of the public and whoever testified before us got this, and I'm hoping that the text is this specific text, and every other text that was debatable before us, too many other cases that during voting on them, I was feeling pain inside myself, because I did feel this is not the way to go, but at the end of the day, it is the way that the ZR is written. I hope this text pertains to this specific case. It's gonna be fixed in such a way to avoid similar situations in the future. And again, it's not our job to fix it, it's our job just to look at it and apply it.
And that's what makes this case particularly frustrating, in that when it came to mechanical voids, that issue was then readdressed by the legislation. Unfortunately, that hasn't been an issue that was brought to the board about whether or not the parties vested prior to the enactment of this new regulation. I can certainly understand the frustration, as it's a difficult decision to come to.
Thank
Can
you.
I add?
Sure.
So as I went back and re-reviewed DOB statements, I agree with the DOB that the permit was validly issued. The proposed project does comply with zoning resolution 82-36 and 82-34, and that there is no ambiguity with regards to the text or the intent. It achieves the reduction in heights as the drafters of the zoning resolution had proposed back in 1993. As at the last hearing, as I was reviewing some of the projects that were built along the corridor within the special Lincoln Square district and outside the special Lincoln Square district in the C47 zoning district, what I did notice was that given similar lot size, the building heights did differ significantly from the period when the zoning resolution was amended in 1993. So projects that were within the special Lincoln Square district that were built prior to 1993 of a similar lot area had much taller building than projects that were built after 1993. And similarly, projects that are outside the Lincoln Square district where this regulation does not apply and the general height and setback or other regulations apply, even in those areas the heights were much taller. So definitely the intent of the drafters was to bring the heights down within the special Lincoln Square district, and the project does that. And as I've stated before, and I think the chair has stated it also, I think nobody could have predicted then the kind of zoning lot that could have been developed, the kind of mechanical spaces that would have been considered, and those have added to the height. The actual livable space, the residential number of floors, 35 floors, is the most typical number of floors that one sees in the special Lincoln Square district. So I take a slight diversion from what my fellow commissioners have said, and I do believe it is very consistent with the zoning resolution have stated. With regards to the mechanical void,
I'm not sure, I think they're talking about the mechanical voids, not the bulk distribution question, right? I think the comments that they were
Okay.
talking about had to do with the voids
okay,
and not the mechanical.
Right, and
not the
that's-
bulk distribution question.
Okay.
That's what, in
And that's
reality,
what's-
that is what's making the height.
that is what's,
For
and
the most
the
part.
fact that this project did get the permit before the zoning resolution was amended, it's kind of,
And that's
what we can.
That's what we
Okay,
were saying.
then I'm in
actually.
agreement.
If there are similar situations, let's
Right.
get the zoning text amended before another case comes before us, and the public and the elected officials become like very frustrated during the hearing, like the last hearing. Actually, during the last hearing, I was like very upset because I did feel like I'm powerless because I feel like they have a point, but we can't do nothing about it.
There's no height restriction in the zoning resolution, and we can't write one in. Because the legislation had the opportunity to do so, and it didn't. And for us to do so,
Right.
again, would make us legislature, it's not something would survive appeal in any event.
And I do want to add, since you raised the subject, I was very disturbed by a comment by one of the legislators that the legislators are powerless to do anything about it, and were powerless because, by the way, this mechanical void, if you want to call it that subject, started fairly long ago, right? And when I think of how facile the city council is in drafting legislation and passing it very quickly, I was very surprised to hear that they felt powerless because we are not legislators, they are. And they don't need to wait for the City Planning Commission to propose something that they view as inadequate. They have the ability to propose their own kind of legislation and have done so many times on many other kinds of situations. And by way of example, the state Senate and Assembly introduced a very aggressive bill to reduce the height of all floors in buildings, and where that goes and so on is another question, but it just shows that, and the state legislature is less, let's say, facile about passing legislation. They propose a lot, but it's harder to get it approved. But I don't find that to be the case with the city council. Every day we're looking at legislation that actually affects the BSA that's being proposed. So I was really disturbed by legislators putting it on the BSA, which really is an adjudicatory body. We're not a legislative body. And yeah, I just wanted to just add that.
In this particular case, they did change the law on this.
Yes. But the
and to
council
their credit-
member,
The council member said it wasn't to their satisfaction. Unfortunately, that's not something we can do. They are the legislative body, and they couldn't do it. That's not something that we can opine on.
right. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Item number 2, 2019-94A, 36 West 66th
Can we
Street,
get
Manhattan.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
No, it's the same
From
case,
the-
same
Oh,
case.
sorry.
It's
Sorry,
the appeal
say
by
again.
Landmark West.
Say the case again, because there's,
Item number 2, 2019-94A, 36 West 66th Street, Manhattan. This is the appeal filed by Landmark West et al.
right. Okay, so as to the submission in this case, the first two questions are the same as in the prior case, 2019-89A. So my responses to those first two questions are the same. And so if I understand it correctly, and counsel, please correct me if I misunderstand, we'll issue a resolution as to those two questions, indicating that a third issue remains to be decided. The third issue is, and first I say, while I do not concede that the papers in this case raise the question whether the mechanical floor space is being used for mechanical equipment in a manner that justifies the several levels of mechanical floors on which the equipment sits, I was very surprised to hear that DOB would not issue a final determination on that question if asked to do so by appellants, hence depriving appellants of their right to appeal that question. In reviewing the Sky House resolution, which was very detailed, and also listening to the videos of the hearings, it's clear that once asked by this board to do so, DOB looked very carefully at the mechanical drawings and issued a letter to BSA stating why it determined that the amount of equipment in those mechanical floors was typical of a building of that type. So I don't see how we cannot avail appellants of that same opportunity in this case. So this case would remain, we would have to reopen it and allow, first of all, appellants to provide the mechanical drawings, direct DOB to review the mechanical drawings, direct the owner to provide the mechanical drawings, which, by the way, in Sky House, the owner was very cooperative. They provided the mechanical drawings, the detailed sets, right? And with that, we could see them. And as a person who, you know, as an architect, I look at mechanical drawings and I just see a lot of equipment. But there was no question, there was a lot of equipment in that case with ductwork and so on. And so it was easy to see that the rooms were filled, but it was DOB's engineers who actually looked at the mechanical equipment and deemed that the amount of equipment made sense for that building type. So we're going to direct all three parties to cooperate in that.
In DOB's initial submission, DOB had stated that it had applied the board's direction in analyzing the floors housing mechanical equipment. DOB had applied BSA's direction in analyzing floors housing mechanical equipment regarding incidental prong, and the amount of equipment proposed for this project was sufficient to justify its exemption from floor area as it was serving the principal use. That's, I'm quoting DOB's statement. So
There's a statement in a letter that where we can't tell what they looked at, how far they looked, and so on, as opposed to what the Sky House case had, which was a very detailed letter that said things like, there are this many furnaces, this many chillers, this many that. They're tied together. I mean, it went into enormous detail, which is why our resolution goes into such enormous detail. And I don't think then, so in the issue of asked and answered, in the Sky House case, the question of asked and answered was, does the zoning resolution tell you how tall the mechanical space has to be? So that we did. But in Sky House, one of the other questions was, do they need this many mechanical floors, right? Is there enough mechanical equipment to justify the number of floors? That was carefully reviewed in front of us, right? And so I don't see how we can treat these two cases differently.
And I think it's particularly interesting in this case, considering the history of this case, and how an additional floor was added to the project in response to the fire department's concern. Therefore, I would like to know whether these floors are being properly utilized, or utilized if one could just add a floor in response to the fire department's concerns.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I have nothing to add on this.
Okay.
Continued hearing items, item number 3, 2017-147A.
Oh, wait, we need to bring.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Back.
Sorry about that. You ready, Commissioner? Continued hearing items, item number 3, 2017-147A, and item number 4, 2018-183A, both are for 7112 Main Street, Queens.
Scrolling, okay. The Department of Buildings August 2nd submission advises that there is indeed an improper open area along the southern side lot line that will need to be filled in order to comply with side yard regulations, filled or a door or something, and it becomes floor area, and they indicated that there's probably enough floor area to make this work, so the owner is directed to file an alteration type 1 application to correct this. At the last hearing, we stated that appellant's submission was very confused and unclear, and that for the most part, the board did not know what appellant wanted the board to review, and what specifically is incorrect about DOB's determination. For appellant's information, we cannot just review DOB's determination. It is appellant's job to direct us to the purported errors for us to consider. We have several new and, I have to say, confusing submissions from appellant on July 10th and August 22nd. I go through each submitted on individual pages and individual folders, which actually did make it clearer because at least it was an individual cover page with backup exhibits. But, right, I do, however, understand that appellant is neither an architect nor a land use lawyer, and I do appreciate the enormous amount of research that went into the submission. I mean, the appellant looked everywhere, under every rock, trying to find things wrong with this project. With respect to the easement, we discussed that at the last hearing. The easement is a private agreement that BSA does not review. We have no reason to believe that area, the easement area, is being used for egress is being improperly obstructed. The egress route is not a zoning issue, so reference to the zoning resolution is incorrect. Egress is a building code issue and an enforcement issue if Department of Buildings thinks that the egress is being blocked. So we're done with that question as far as I'm concerned. The site's northern side lot line is shared with the rear lot lines of houses located in an R4B district. As such, it must comply with section 33-293, and an 8-foot open area at curb level, a defined term, must be provided along the side lot line. A 10-foot open area is provided there that is coincident with a right-of-way. I don't believe we have a survey that indicates the level of that open area. And I'm not sure I understand DOB's reading. On this northern side lot line, the lot line is only coincident with rear lot lines or the adjoining properties, so only section 33-293 applies, which requires open area at curb level. So DOB says it's adjacent to side lots. The side lot line is adjacent to both rear lot lines and side lot lines, which is not the case with respect to this particular side lot line. However, although no side yard is required if none is provided in this district, when an open area is provided along a side lot line in the district, it converts to a side yard pursuant to section 3325. Then section 3322 applies, which governs the level of yards, because once it's a side yard, we look at what the level of a yard is required to be, and it states that, quote, "The level of a yard shall not be higher than curb level." But it states, "This section shall not be construed to require that natural grade level be disturbed in order to comply." So it's another way of getting to the same conclusion that DOB got to, which is you're not required to disturb natural grade. I see the right-of-way is the existing natural grade, otherwise it wouldn't work as a right-of-way if you had to either raise it or lower it. And I don't see why it should be disturbed to meet the open area side yard requirement. Likewise, the rear lot line of the subject site is shared with the side lot line of a house in an R4B. That rear lot line has to comply with section 33-291, providing a minimum of 8 feet of depth of open space, quote, not higher than curb level. That's what it says in the text. So those both agree in terms of not higher than curb level. The zoning district boundary lines, that's the next one of the next questions posed. The site appears at the middle left edge of zoning map 14C. The district is delineated by hatching, shown on the zoning map key to be a C12 within the larger R4 district. The dimension on the depth of the C12 from Main Street is shown on the block to the immediate south as 100 feet. As to the depth, and the reason I'm talking about this is because the appellant saying we don't even really know where the zoning district boundary is, the zoning resolution isn't clear, and so on. But again, not being an architect or a land use lawyer, these kinds of methods of finding out depth are just known to us. We know where to look, right? So as to the depth from 71st Avenue or 71st Road, the legend on that map indicates that Article 7, Chapter 6 has more information on the location of district boundary lines where measurements are not given. Section 76-132 states that where the boundary line is parallel to the long dimension of the block between parallel streets, quote, "Such boundary line shall be considered to be coincident with the center line of the block," unquote. The tax map indicates that the block is 180 feet. Hence, the center line is 90 feet from both 71st Road and 71st Avenue. The tax map also indicates that lot 132, which is the subject tax lot, falls entirely within the 90 feet that is closest to 71st Road, hence within the C1-2 overlay and the R4 district. To clarify for the appellant, the measurements are taken from the street line, which is a defined term, and refers to the front property line facing the given street and not to the street edge of the sidewalk curb, which is what appellant was doing. He was measuring the curb depth and saying the curb over here is this much and over here it's that much. We don't measure to the street line, to the curb edge for street width. We measure, or the street line, we measure to the property line. So I think that issue is closed. With respect to Article 7, Chapter 7, another question that was raised by appellant, the subject zoning lot is not divided by district boundaries. but sits fully within an R4 with a C1-2 overlay district as discussed above. So Article 7, Chapter 7 does not apply. That closes that issue. With respect to the open space rooftop playground, appellant didn't state what his concerns are about this space, so I'm not sure what we are supposed to be considering. But a non-discretionary action, that is a building permit, is not subject to the City Environmental Quality Review, seeker. This fact can be found in the City Environmental Quality Review Act under the Type 2 actions. Under the rules of statutory construction, you cannot import from one inapplicable law to find meaning in another law, or even one applicable law to find meaning in another law. And I would direct the appellant to section, part 617, section 617.5 of the State Environmental Quality Review Act. I would ask, at this point, I'd ask the appellant, really, what is the appellant aiming at with this entire appeal? Is the appellant's desire to shut down the operation or to make specific changes to it? Because, for example, if the rooftop play area is causing distress due to noise or something else, then the daycare owner should install acoustical fencing all the way around the roof, being careful to allow adequate fire department access. That's one way that we deal always with daycare roofs, right? But I don't know what the issues are. I don't really know what appellant is trying to accomplish with this appeal. I note also that daycare centers are regulated by the Department of Health under Article 47 of the New York City Health Code. Limitations on the physical plant. This is for appellant to look at, and then it's not our domain. The limitations on the physical plant begin at section 47.39. If appellant has concerns about the facility's operations with respect to Article 47, it should reach out to the Department of Health, who manages this issue, and will reach out to the daycare provider and say you're not in compliance, or inspect or something. With regard to height, if I understand correctly, appellant objects to the height of the parapet wall and fence. The maximum height in this C1-2 R4 district for community facility building is governed by section 33-431 of the zoning resolution and is subject to a sky exposure plane that is measured from the street line, again, that's the property line of Main Street, with a maximum height of 35 feet and then a sky exposure plane of 1-to-1. According to the drawings, the building is 30 feet high, so it's lower than the maximum height. We don't have a recent survey to ascertain what the elevations are at the street line, but the 2015 survey provided by appellant shows the average street line elevation is 77.05, which matches what's shown on the approved plans, and which allows a maximum building height to the roof of 35 feet or elevation 112.05. All of those elevations are shown on the drawings and were shown to DOB, who's been looking at all of these questions, because DOB really did systematically go through responses. So with respect to permitted, I'm almost done. Permitted obstruction was another question asked. Section 33-42 lists the obstructions that can penetrate the maximum height, including, quote, parapet walls not more than 4 feet in height as measured from the maximum height limit, unquote. So the maximum height limit is 35 plus the sky exposure plane. So a parapet wall at the front lot line can rise to 39 feet, actually, and doesn't. This building is only 30 feet plus a parapet wall of 4 feet. In addition, wire, chain link, or other transparent fences are permitted obstructions without height limitation. That's another one of the permitted obstructions. We discussed at the last hearing the subject of the elevator and stair bulkheads, and that they are also permitted obstructions within limitations. I don't think we need to go over that again, and I believe that covers all of the issues raised by appellants. Any other comments by anyone on
No, thank you for the thorough breakdown of all the comments. I think I just want to add the thing with the zoning district boundaries. It is a little bit Not easy to read the zoning district map unless one reads the zoning text alongside as to that instructs how to read a zoning district map, and based on both of those sections of the zoning resolution, the subject site falls clearly within an R4 with the C12 overlay, and therefore does not have to be subjected to any zoning lot, split lot regulations. I think this is an as-of-right development. With regards to the open space on the roof, I thought the appellant was arguing that open space is to be not above street level he was arguing that the secra and the zoning resolution need to be tied. And as you pointed out, they are not. They serve two separate purposes. So, anyway, I don't have anything to add to it.
Okay.
The only thing I had to add was that I thought that his question on open space was that the playground should be counting towards the open space
That's
requirements,
right, yeah.
even though there's no residential in the building,
Right.
and should not count because there is no open space
Okay.
requirement. That's what I thought it was.
You're right.
Okay.
No,
All
I
right,
agree.
so then, because there's no open space requirement for a community facility, where there's no residential on the lot, it'd be different if there were residential.
Right.
Okay, I understand. Then, so to finish the thought,
So
finish your thought.
therefore, there's no requirement that the open space on the roof be accessible to everybody.
That's right. That's what.
Okay. But, and I guess one of the reasons that I brought up this subject of noise and so on is I'm trying to understand what it is
So the-
appellant's problem is with this project. And so I thought maybe the problem is that it's too noisy with kids on the roof. So that's one way the daycare center could put acoustical fencing if that was actually the problem. right?
I second that. I am looking forward to a candid discussion with the applicant, with the appellant, to see what his actual concerns are. Because it looks like it seemed to me, through reading it, that this is one of those cases where we throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Right.
Right, but however, this isn't a discretionary project, so therefore, knowing the appellant's true motives really is not going to enable us or give us any power
No,
to
correct.
intervene on his behalf. So I
Right.
don't know whether we need to know the appellant's true motive.
We don't need to
here.
know, but it's obviously a neighbor, this is a little different than a whole community opposed to a giant project. This is obviously, the owner of the house next door is upset about the project next door, right? And so we've done this before with another case where we do ask the appellant, what is it you actually want here? Because we're not able to conclude that this thing is hurting you. What are you after? And the answer in that other case was, there wasn't an answer. But sometimes it's really like they're just making too much noise.
Right, but that was, at least that case was under our jurisdiction. It was there for the special permit.
No, that case was another, it was an appeal because of the undermining of the foundations by the adjoining property. There was, I forget exactly what the question was. There wasn't a special permit.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about the special permit for the PCE with the noise. Remember the
No,
storefront
right.
PCE? I thought that's the one you were talking
No,
about.
I mean, this was another one of those, a neighbor against a neighbor, and we've had a number of these small house against a small house kind of disputes where we hear from the neighbor my real problem, and then it's hidden behind a zoning question. So sometimes solving, or not, at least drawing attention to the real problem, then we can say, go to the Department of Health and ask them, or whatever. It's just a more like a neighborly advice, as opposed to us telling anybody that they have to do anything. I'm not saying we have any authority in that situation, but, yeah, okay. I agree that we don't have authority. Okay.
I agree as well.
Yeah.
Special order calendar, decision items, item number 5, 54084BZ, 341 Soundview Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, so they requested an adjournment on this and to close this. So, and the case has been going on and was closed the last hearing in July in anticipation of something small, the receipt of proof that landscaping was installed. repair of the block wall and fence slatting. So I would say not okay to adjourn. The applicant's representative must explain the reason for the delay, because otherwise it just goes on and on without us knowing what's happening. Not to mention the history of this is like 2 adjournments. A submission in July of 2016, been here for 3 years plus. A dismissal warning letter sent to them back in 2016. I'm sorry, in 2017. So what's going on?
Continued hearing items, item number 6, 41850BZ, 7369 217th Street, 7336 Brinkville Boulevard, 21902 74th Avenue, and 7310 228th Street, Queens. This is the Board of Standards and Appeals compliance hearing.
Correct. So the owners submitted, and we asked them to do this, the owners submitted, though late, but nonetheless, we were happy to get it, a letter updating the status of their landscaping contract and their intention to engage a new company at the termination of their December 31 season, the old contractor's season. They're still waiting for a proposal from the proposed company. They provided a sample contract and a list of plants that might be installed, and their Latin names, but no quantities, which presumably will be provided in the proposal. The city council member also submitted a letter stating that he's working with the owners to secure a source of trees. The owners request an adjournment until the new company can begin its work in the spring, but to keep this sort of moving so we know what's going on, I would like to recommend that owners submit to us a copy of the executed contract and attached proposal, which I presume they will have finalized by January 2020, in order to begin the planting in March 2020. I get that they may not even end up going with that contractor because they don't actually have a proposal, so it may turn out it's too much money or something like that. So I would say we should just have another follow-up on this in January. Anybody else?
Item number 7, 75160BZ, 105 New Dorp Lane, Staten Island. We received fire department letter.
Okay. We did just now, this morning?
I saw something over the week today.
I didn't find. Okay.
Yeah. Let me just tell you what it,
The application is being revised to reflect an amendment. At the first and only hearing in April, we stated that if the application is for an amendment, the neighbors would have to be notified, and as far as I can tell, they weren't. So since I'm pretty sure they weren't, it actually has to be more than neighbors, it has to be new notice, right? Because it's, the prior application was for an extension of term, right? This is an application, an amendment, so it means the community board needs to be involved in this. So we have to adjourn this to allow for proper notice and for the community board to weigh in. Okay.
so the fire department needs clarification of the proposed building expansion, construction, and distances from the adjoining properties. The premises located at 97 New Dorp Lane from our site visit and from image obtained from Zola shows the premises constructed to the rear lot line. The proposed plan shows these premises set back from the rear lot line, which we need clarification for this discrepancy. The fire department concerns are due to the construction type at 97 New Dorp Lane, which the certificate of occupancy lists the construction classification as 2B. As per table 3.4 of the New York 1968, New York City Building Code, the exterior wall is a 2-hour rated non-combustible materials. We respectfully request the board direct the applicant to clarify these discrepancies.
Okay, so,
It's working together.
That's been
so,
forwarded to everybody.
well, one of the issues is to clarify discrepancies means we also need a survey, because the only way to know whether it's on the lot line is a survey.
Yeah, there are some photographs the fire department submitted on the CVO. You were forwarded this at
Okay.
10 o'clock this morning, sorry.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, so we have to adjourn this.
Okay.
But, you know, what's unfortunate is we said this at the last hearing, that if it was amended, it would have to be noticed. So I don't understand why that didn't happen. Okay.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair. So Since the notification's at the discretion of the board, are we doing a 200-foot or just the contiguous neighbors?
400 feet?
Isn't it normally 400 feet? Why would it be, isn't it 400?
Depends on the size of the lot and all that.
Right, but it's, I don't know how big the lot is, I can write that down. I don't know, that's a, we don't have to decide that here, that'll be something
This is a
they call.
pre-61.
It's a pre-61 variance, right?
Yeah, so if this were on the BZ calendar as a reinstatement, it'd be 200 feet notification.
Oh, okay. So let's not do notification here. That's something where, when there's notice sent out, the requirement for notice, doesn't it say on, it doesn't say on the notice.
For this type of application, for the amendment, there is no notification requirement. It's that the board requested the notification at the April hearing.
This is an extension of term. That's what they filed as.
Yes.
And then they decided to amend the application. So our understanding is that an amendment always has to notify.
No. But the board...
That's what we
Yeah.
directed them to do. I don't want to confuse everything. We directed them to notify, and that's why we're adjourning. I don't understand. Otherwise, you're depriving the community of knowing what's going to happen on the site. So...
No, there's, I'm
Okay.
just asking,
So again, let's not talk about radius here because we need more information. Let's
Okay.
go around with council.
Okay.
Do you
Okay?
want us to read any comments on what has been submitted, or no? Hold off on that.
I think hold off because otherwise, since we're noticing, then the community wouldn't have an opportunity to hear our comments and so on, right?
Item number 8, 90-91BZ, 630, 636 City Island, the Bronx.
I appreciate the photos that are exactly as requested. I just want to say that from the start. With them, we see the entire interior and exterior perimeter of the lot and understand what is going on at the site. So I would actually like to use that particular photo collection as a model because this is probably the only one that's done it correctly. The only flaw was that the photos aren't numbered, so there's this great key plan, but then it doesn't, the photos themselves are not numbered, so you have to remember, wait a minute, am I up to number 6, or is this number 11? And so you need to number the photographs. So in photos 2 and 3, which I think are photos 2 and 3, the parking lot is very visible from the residential property next door, and the slatting in the fence isn't adequate to conceal the cars and the truck that is taller than the fence height. I think the parking area needs a landscape buffer all the way around that allows for dense planting and high shrubs and trees. Asphalt or concrete paving in the parking area and ramp are cracked and need to be repaired and resurfaced all the way out to the sidewalk, because you even see the sidewalk connection is all broken, and the sidewalk. The fencing is bent and in poor condition and needs to be replaced. The northern side of the building facing the residence actually looks okay. There's even vines growing up it, so that actually is an improvement. I would have, since it was started, preferred that there's this decorative cladding that goes around that side for about 15 feet. It would have been great if it went all the way to the end, because it would have been more residential in character, but it looks okay on that side. The dumpster enclosure is collapsed, and in any event should be pulled away from the adjacent residential use. And there's miscellaneous signage that needs to be removed from that area. I'd like to know whether the approved use permits the storage of heavy construction machinery on the site, which is what we see. We actually see some sort of a mini earth mover or something, and very large trucks. That portion, if that's permitted, which is something to discuss, that portion of the parking area looks terrible and doesn't belong in a residence district. Unless it's much better screened and buffered from the neighbors. There are three-story residential buildings that look down on an overflowing open haul truck. I don't think that that's the appropriate thing to have in a residence district. The proposed plans do show 4 feet of a planting bed all the way around the site. Trees must be provided that will grow to at least 8 feet high and remain full all the way up. So that has to do with the specification on the tree or the shrub. The plans indicate the fencing won't be replaced, and it has to be. They should add to the landscaping plans details for a planting bed with curbs to protect the planting and minimum depth and width that ensures the longevity of these large shrubs that are going to grow to 8 feet high. They need to add in front of the planting bed curb wheel stops or bollards to prevent cars from extending into the planting bed. These should be set far enough back to work for trucks if we were to allow trucks. They need to show the property line between the commercial and residential uses that faces Miniford, so that there's this, what looks like a through lot, but it's really commercial facing one way and residential facing the other, and we need to understand where the residential boundary is. The lumens exceed 0 at all the property lines. I think the result of that is, that's because the light poles are far too high and with too broad of a beam range. On the elevations, you need to show all the materials. We asked for information on the difference between the approved plans, the existing, and the proposed, and I didn't find that. The explanation for the reduction to 18 parking spaces is that the eating, drinking establishment will be reduced in size to fall below the 15-space waiver amount, but I'm not actually sure you can do that when you have use group 6 all combined into a single building, right? And can you really pick, choose, divide, and waive? So arguably you can. So what they're saying is section 112-112 in the special purpose district states that for eating or drinking establishments, the provisions of section 3623, which is the waiver provisions, with respect to enlargements or extension, with respect only to enlargements or extensions to provide off-street parking, with respect only are hereby made inapplicable. So it says, listen to us, not that other section for waiver provisions. And then it says, for eating or drinking establishments with frontage on City Island Avenue, which this has, if less than 15 accessory off-street parking spaces are required, all such parking spaces shall be waived. So that sounds like you can pick and choose on the eating and drinking if it's less than 15. I don't really understand that because you have other commercial, and so, all right, it sort of doesn't really make sense. But, and the zoning resolution isn't clear that well, it talks about an establishment, which we've talked about ad infinitum on another case, and an establishment is in the zoning resolution that like retail store, and it isn't necessarily the entire retail complex. So I kind of think applicant is right about that, but I think it's an unfortunate decision on the part of the zoning resolution. Anyhow, but I also don't see the parking calculations for the retail anywhere. They're supposed to be, it's 1 per 300 square feet of retail. In any event, the modifications discussed above should be done now. And I'm curious also, with respect to this reduction in the eating and drinking, just knowing how rental leases work, how do you reduce the rental area of an eating and drinking establishment when there's a lease? The lease says you get this many square feet. How do you take away those many square feet from an existing lease? Except by maybe referring to the section in the lease that says whatever I rented you was unlawful or something like that. I don't know. But the lease may even say, I'm going to give you parking. So I'm not totally believing it can be done. Anybody else?
I just have a couple of comments with regards to the parking space. First of all, the applicant is showing that there is a ramp in the rear of the building that will provide ADA access, and that there is a 3-foot wide walkway between the ramp from the handicap parking lots. My concern is that, this ramp will be used not just for that, it could be used for baby strollers or anything. So this walkway should be indicated all the way, extending all the way along the parking spaces up to number 8, maybe through some yellow hatching to protect that walkway. That's my recommendation. Basically,
The ramp should be extended or the walkway?
The walkway.
The walkway.
Extended. And also to prevent vehicles from encroaching onto that walkway, there should be another wheel.
With a wheel stop.
Wheel stop.
With wheel stops,
Wheel
okay.
stop. And I think at the last hearing, we had asked the applicant to file for street tree permit.
Yeah, they did.
Have they submitted that?
think they-
I don't remember seeing that. Those are my questions.
Thought I
Much
saw
on
that.
this case.
Okay, we can check. I may have seen it on another one. You didn't see on another one, street tree application. Okay.
I had the same question you did about the waiver of the parking, because it just seems to me that if you were to then convert the other 3 stores to eating and drinking, so that you had like maybe a Baskin Robbins and another this and a this and a this, you wouldn't have to have any parking then.
Each
Because
establishment.
if you did it by
Right, I
establishment,
know.
each one would be less than 15.
That's true.
So I just was wondering about that. I guess that's probably more for an appeal than.
Yeah. What
than
did
for an
city
extension.
planning mean
Yeah,
by that?
Exactly. So, and then I just had a question about the trucks, because I noticed in the first hearing that there was truck parking, and now there's still truck parking, so I just wanted to know more about the operations.
Move on?
I didn't see, I know it was mentioned in the letter, but I didn't see the lumens diagram as,
Oh, it's in there because I was looking at it.
Yeah, the lumen spread shows pretty high lumen level along the residential and the commercial.
Yes.
and we stated that it should be at 0 at that point.
It should be at 0, and it's exceeding 0 at all the property lines. And, just kind of note to the various applicant representatives, they know that the lumen spread diagram should show 0 at the property lines. Don't submit to us a lumen spread that shows it exceeding that. Have it corrected, have the site corrected to not exceed it. This just adds to hearings unnecessarily. You already know what's expected. Anyhow, okay.
Item number 9, 17193BZ, 3245 75th Street, Queens.
Okay, we're still needing a community board recommendation, but I'm not sure that we should be waiting for it. This was submitted in 2017. They would have heard it over a year ago. So if they, I think there was a comment in the submission that said they're going to be considering it in September. Well, what's been going on for more than a year? So I would love to hear what they have to say about this site, but they're supposed to do this in 60 days. So much of the work discussed at the last hearing has to actually be done. Remove the barbed wire, install the trees, repair the sidewalk, add no parking to the sidewalk signs, no parking on the sidewalk signs, paint the fence. Stackers, they say stackers are being removed because fire department objected. We need to see them removed, and I'd like fire department to put this on their inspection list because maybe they're not removed, who knows. The rear wall that faces the residential properties was painted at least, so one check. I don't understand drawing A-004 with sections entitled proposed. Actually, many of the drawings are titled proposed. This building is already there and should be titled existing/proposed and indicate what changes will be made to the existing. So it's quite confusing to understand like what's going on here. The cover letter says that no parking signs are, on sidewalk signs are being provided, but the teeny elevations that were provided have what is in the size of a flea square, and it's labeled that there's going to be a sign, but it doesn't say what the sign says. So it just says a lot of little signs, but it doesn't say what the sign says. So I don't understand that. And then I'm just reading what the conditions of the prior approval were, because there was a comment that we think the sidewalk is in good condition in the cover letter. It says the condition of the prior approval was the sidewalk fronting 75th Street shall be repaired in accordance with the plans. So it sounds like they kind of never did that. Fencing and landscaping shall be maintained, and the site shall be maintained graffiti-free. So there's kind of a standing requirement to maintain the site. Anybody else on this? No?
Item number 10, 13204BZ, 310 East Houston Street, Manhattan.
Sorry. I think we finally have an application that is internally consistent and where the action requested is clear. I just defer to Commissioner Otley Brown about whether she's satisfied with the financial submission.
I had one question, basically. Since they were including the air rights sales of lot 7503 into this application, I had one question. What is the development rights attributable to 7503? And were they available at the time of the variance? I didn't get that answer. That's all I wanted. So I have...
Can you just restate the question very slowly so that they can hear it?
Considering that you want to sell the development rights for lot 40 and lot 7503, I now have the total amount of development rights, which is 11,234.4. The question is, how much of these rights were actually available at the time of the variance? And were they included in the amended financials that we received? Because right now, the amended financials have 1,627 square foot of development rights added into the equation. Is that all that there was at the time of the variance? And neither the financials nor the statement actually answer that clearly.
Okay. So I do want to say that, for me, and probably for Commissioner Otley Brown, it's an extremely frustrating application because it's such a simple thing. But I do want to note that before I came to this job, one of my specialties was the transfer of transferable development rights. So it's like I ate it for breakfast. So I completely understood all of the things that go into it. And I get the impression that this applicant's representative, say a council, never deals with development rights, so doesn't know even the most basic thing about it, because they were subdividing the zoning lot and transferring the development rights from the old zoning lot to the new zoning lot to the adjacent one, and not understanding that that's an impossibility. And so that went on for like 4 hearings, in addition to not understanding the very simple Bella Vista test. Did you have them before? Did you count them into the analysis? Is it a windfall profit, right?
That's our
all.
major, that's the main thing that we're supposed to be looking at in these type of applications.
Yes. So, yeah.
I mean, they could answer that tomorrow at the podium, and
Right.
then I'll be fine.
Okay.
That's what I need to know.
But they have to answer it clearly enough so that our council can actually write a resolution. And if they can, and what I would therefore recommend is not answering it at the podium, because they didn't seem to understand when they were standing at the podium, is to write down the answer now and read it and proof it and give it to a friend who actually knows how to deal with transferable development rights and Bella Vista. Because when you admit that you don't know how to do something, it's a lot faster when you ask somebody else.
And I just want to say it's a pretty crucial question because there are so many receptor sites, so there is value. So that's why.
May I move on?
1 second.
Okay. All right. New cases, item number 11, 222709BZ, 100-14 Roosevelt Avenue, Queens.
Okay, there are no notice requirements for an extension of time to complete construction. On February 8th, 2019, our executive director asked the applicant why a variance is still needed if the area was rezoned from an R6B to a C14, and the question still stands. They never responded to that question. When I checked the amount of floor area that's allowed under the C14, it's 2 FAR for commercial, and the variance was granted at 1.8 FAR, so it's not like they need the variance for bulk. And I don't think they needed I don't think they needed it for height and setback. It's only a 2-story structure. So unless they can explain why they need the variance, this was filed a pretty long time ago. They never responded to the question. This was filed in February. They never responded to the question. I don't know. So if the variance is still needed, however, they need to provide proof of compliance with the conditions and a completion timeline for construction. And I'd also, with respect to that rezoning, the boundaries of the zoning map amendment do need to be verified by reading the city planning report, because the zoning map, because when I was checking it, I was thinking, well, maybe it didn't change zoning. The zoning district didn't change. So when I looked at the zoning map in 2015, that shows this site now in a C14, it doesn't have that customary little dotted line around it to indicate it's a recent rezoning, and when I go to the prior zoning map, it also doesn't have it. So it might have been a correction because the other, the properties across the street were rezoned, but longer ago. So it's just, it's not clear to me, but that would be very clear in the city planning report, because it always tells you how many feet to the south and this and that, right? So that hatching it never gets dotted lines around it to indicate the rezoning. So, okay. So, I don't really know, but if we need this variance, then they need to give us more information. Anything else? Any other comments?
My recollection, because I was here for the variance, might be that it needed it for lot coverage or something, because it was such a narrow triangular lot. But, you know, I think it's definitely, the applicant needs to answer that question.
Right.
But that's what I was thinking. It was like a lot coverage or yard kind of situation.
Okay. True. Okay. Because it was a use waiver, so therefore we didn't waive any bulk. Right. Okay.
Item number 12, 21613BZ, 750 Barclay Avenue, Staten Island.
There are no notice requirements for extensions of time to complete construction. We need a clear construction timeline of work and permitting completed to date, and a timeline for completion. It has been 4 years since the letter of substantial compliance was issued, so I don't really understand the representation that we've been working and the permitting is so slow and this and that. I don't actually understand that. So, and rather than have it in a letter form, have the timeline in a more classic construction timeline where you list all the permits, and then there's, you know, the year, January through December, and you show how you're moving across with the timeline and all the requirements, which is standard for these applications. Anybody else?
Item number 13, 2018-125A, 495 Wald Avenue, Staten Island. We put this case back on the calendar to accept the letter for DEP.
Right.
The original
I don't
letter
have
was
the letter.
incorrect.
That's what you're going to do. Okay. It's just because in writing the resolution, it was discovered we were missing a critical element, and so have to reopen.
Appeals calendar, decision item number 14, 205-15A through 214-15A, Hook Creek Boulevard,
Oh,
Fortune Way.
sorry, so
This is being withdrawn?
Which is what?
Which is, sorry, I'm confused.
Yeah.
Which is being withdrawn, Cunard?
No, Hook Creek Boulevard. I received a letter this,
Didn't we just have one?
Wait a minute, wait, stop.
what am I
We
wrong?
just did Wild,
Right?
and now my next one I see is, read it again, I thought it's Cunard.
Hook Creek Boulevard.
Hook Creek, last time, at the last hearing, we had
Oh, it
scheduled
got,
it for decision.
no, it's just I'm not in the right order, so it's a different order than what my,
Item number 205-15A through 214-15A. It was
yeah, I
laid
have
over
that
from
as
September.
14.
Huh?
Okay, all right, doesn't matter. So you have it as 12, I have it as 14.
Okay, so the applicant.
Hold on a second, let everybody find it, because I think yours is different than our list.
Yeah, I have it as 14.
I have it as 14.
We all have it
I
as
did the
14, so I
I
don't
said
know.
14.
No, because you skipped 12 and 13.
12 was Barclay, 13 was Wild Avenue,
Yes,
14 is
Yeah.
Hook Creek.
yes.
Oh, well, all right, I'm just gonna have to follow the bouncing ball.
Okay.
Okay, so that's
So-
not the order I have. Okay, so just a second. So Hook Creek, number 14. All right, could you read that again?
Okay, so it's 205-15A through 214-15A. It's 12860 to 12876 Hook Creek Boulevard and 12863 to 12875 Fortune Way, Queens. The applicant this morning has requested to withdraw this application without prejudice, with
Okay.
leave given to refile the application subsequent to addressing the underlying issues raised by the fire department and the board.
This is a good idea because they didn't submit, their submission was incomplete. So I was gonna, so withdrawal is better than us voting on it on the merits or for failure, lack of prosecution. Okay.
Okay, continued hearing items. Item number 15, 2017-202A, 43 Cunard Avenue. We have a request for an adjournment.
Did we get a request? I just didn't find anything submitted. We got a request for adjournment? I
Yeah, I'll
found
double
nothing
check
in the
that, yeah.
folder.
Yeah, I have it as a journal.
I have it as adjourned, but I think I wrote about it. I asked a question.
Yeah, that's what I had. I'll look again, but you think I'm mistaken? Cunard. I'll take a look.
Okay, see, make sure there's a letter.
Yes.
I didn't find the letter, but it may be
Yeah, I
that we...
didn't see it as well.
Okay, maybe I received a phone call or something, it didn't come in. Okay. Item number 16, 209
Actually, there is an adjournment request letter that was submitted.
When was it submitted? What, no, that's from May.
Right.
So that's the thing, I only found the May adjournment, I didn't find
I'm gonna open
anything
this
else.
one. Open this, it's only
I
May.
have asked. That's good.
Yeah.
Put it in this. No, that's May. All right, I'll double check.
Right,
But they didn't submit
yeah.
anything anyway, so.
Right, so it's either administratively adjourned or, but,
I'll double
what's
check that,
going
because it
on?
might have been the administrative adjournment, okay. Item number 16, 2019 1-A through 2019 5-A. This is 7/11/15/1923 Nello Court, Staten Island.
we have, sorry. Sorry. We had asked this applicant to make a case for why this lot suffers a hardship from being limited to 3 houses instead of 5. I think he did a pretty good job in analyzing the surrounding site conditions, but I'm not understanding the argument that there could have been 7 houses and the owner decided only to develop 5. There are 5 two-family houses with tandem parking spaced using minimum yard requirements with the minimum necessary access road. Where in the world would the other 2 houses have gone? So I don't think that's a true statement. And the trouble I actually have with this hardship argument, and they gave it a college try, I thought, is that there are at least 11 houses/sites fronting on Sprague with the same or wider lot dimensions as these houses would have if they were developed as of right. All 11 of those houses have curb cuts at the street line. That's a standard suburban model in a low-density district such as this one, curb cuts. And this lot is nowhere near as deep as the lot on which the very large houses were built on their own cul-de-sac next door, which was the other argument that was given. That guy has a interior road, why shouldn't this one? But that site is almost twice as deep and actually is flag-shaped as this one and much wider. So I actually don't think it meets the hardship argument. And so that's where I am on that. Others?
I think I'd stated my position on this one at the last hearing. I think this is a very reasonable proposal. This has been reviewed by the Department of City Planning for subdivision. And yes, there is a mix of development typologies with homes having curb cuts at the street level, and then there are cul-de-sacs that are providing access ways to individual homes or cluster of homes. So there isn't a one standard pattern here. It's an amalgamation of various street frontages, and I think this is quite reasonable.
I agree with Commissioner Shanda that this is reasonable. I think that to go from 3 homes to 5 homes is not too large an ask. I see the hardship because it is an extremely deep lot. And to build 3 large homes doesn't necessarily build for the market in the area, because he has shown the built character have homes that are either attached with an average of 1,000 to 1,100 square feet or detached maxing at about 2,000 square feet. So it's not like they would have 3 very large homes and have it fit into the market or fit into the character here. So that's why I thought that 5 is not an overreach. And they're only using 70% of their floor area.
Yeah, I believe the way they are looking at it is to build 5 homes is much better than building 3. But since we have similar houses, especially to the north of the property, in Sprague, like similar width, similar depth, so I'm tending not to buy the hardship argument submitted by them because of like the too many houses that exist in the same neighborhood. That doesn't make the proposal of 3 homes with the entire lot depth is a weird proposal. I believe it could be a reasonable proposal and it's marketable too.
I was not convinced by the hardship argument.
Speak up.
Sorry, I was not convinced by the hardship argument. There is a difference between having a hardship and having a better use. This is in line with the community. To claim that this unit would have a hardship, we may very well have all 11 of those units returning to us asking for the same thing, but they haven't detailed a hardship.
All the 11 of, oh, you mean the other sites?
The other sites.
Okay.
They haven't detailed a hardship. All they've stated is that this would be a better use.
Which is true, by the way, yes. Building 5 is much better than building 3. But the hardship argument is not about making like more profit. It's about not making enough profit that makes the subject project feasible, which I believe they failed to.
Not to get into the complete law, nor did they respond to the questions with regard to properties and how one of the properties is fronting and how that adjacent property is fronting, how that relates to this particular ask. And I wanted to state that I also agree with both Commissioner Shanda and Commissioner Otley Brown. This is not a particularly large ask for a GCL 36, but the real concern is, do they meet the hardship? And have they alleged the hardship? And they certainly haven't alleged, in my opinion, they certainly haven't properly alleged a hardship here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Move on? Mm-hmm. New cases, item number 17, 250-14A and 253-14A through 257-14A. This is 5041, 5300, and 5310 Grosvenor Avenue, and 5041, oh, for some reason that's wrong, 5030, 5040 Goodridge Avenue, the Bronx. It's an extension of time to complete construction.
Fairly a complicated one. So we have proof of notice of hearing to officials. I didn't find proof of service of initial application, but I don't believe this is actually required for extensions of time to complete construction, even though we sent out a notice of hearing that required notice, so they notified.
This is an extension under the original granting.
Right, but they complied with our request. We sent to them a letter requiring that they notify officials.
Right, and
I don't think that's required under our rules.
and then there was a,
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying,
okay.
we shouldn't have sent it if it's not required by our rules. Or we eventually change our rules, but whatever. Statement of facts revised has old data in it. It's called Statement of Facts Revised, which has old data in it. It talks about construction to begin in May on some sites. I'm assuming that means May of 2019. They should update the summary of construction as actually started on those sites and give us photographs. They need to go through the Putnam test, which is the three-pronged test to establish whether there's been an abandonment and an intention to proceed, and I forget what the other prongs are, but they need to go through the test. They also need to add a serious loss test, that actually Putnam or its progeny actually deals with the subject of major developments. So they need to explain why it has taken so long to start on the remaining house sites, and also what serious loss would occur if those houses have to be as of right under current zoning. This is with respect to Putnam. It deals with these types of major developments and what point potential loss is considered to have been recouped. Because at what point it's been considered to have been recouped, because as they sell off the sites, this is actually, I don't know if it was Putnam itself or another one of the cases, as they sell off the sites, they start to make back their investment, and this is all about investment-backed expectations. So they need to go through that. I'm not saying that they lose under Putnam, but I'm saying they must address this, because it really applies very specifically to this. Anyway. Anybody?
Just to make note, the community board has asked that we lay this over to October, 24th?
Oh, after
October 24th. For the Jewish holidays, they want to have their land use committee meeting, community board. I think according to what they spoke to us, that the applicant council agreed to this.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Because normally, that's the thing, they weren't required to notify the community board. All right.
Well, considering it was a contentious case before, I thought it was.
Oh, maybe that's why they were asking.
Yeah, there was
notify.
issues the last time, so.
I didn't know that, okay.
Okay.
Right, because it's a vesting case, right?
There was also a demapping application to the city planning, which there was a demapping application, which though the city planning commission had approved it, the borough president and the city council had disapproved it, so the developer had to follow up with an as-of-right development under the old SNAD.
Right, right. No, there's no question, this has gone through a lot of review,
yeah.
but that's why they need to be very clear about the timeline and so on, and why they didn't start on these last houses. What I'm seeing, just in how a development works with a large developer, you could see, they started in a house and in a year they're done, and they get a C of O on most of the houses. So it could be that they only build like 2 houses at a time because that's how the crew works, right? You don't throw 20 different crews on the job. You have one crew build one house and another house, and then they finish in a year, and then they start on the next, which is certainly a reasonable way of building a project. So, but it's just to understand it, they don't explain that.
And they had to do street network also,
Sure.
and there's quite a bit of a terrain, so that,
Right,
those are factors also not clear from the documentations
right,
provided.
correct. Did you want to add any?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with you that they have to fill out the information for all 3 findings: substantial work, substantial money, and serious loss.
Go. Okay, go.
Item number 18, 2018, 129A, 484F, Sharretts Road, Staten Island.
All right. We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval with 2 opposed. It was difficult to understand from the statement of facts, but I think this is an existing T-shaped zoning lot with only 50 feet of frontage on Sharretts Road, which is a final mapped CCO street at 32 to 37 feet wide with title not vested in New York City. The existing 2-story building sits far back on the lot, fronting on unmapped Marjorie Street, which is 40 feet, which has a 40-foot wide curb to this property line, I think. So measured from the opposing curb to this property line is 40 feet, I think. And the reason I say I think is because despite all the drawings, it's very hard to figure this out. The existing lot is proposed to be enlarged with another parcel that only has frontage on Marjorie, and the existing building will be enlarged into it. There were no curb cuts to speak of. There are no curb cuts to speak of on Marjorie, even though the loading docks that exist are there. So plans now show new curb cuts. The existing condition is just kind of Wild West. They just roll over the dirt into the loading docks. So I'd like to know, because it's an existing building and arguably it's an existing manufacturing use, is it the enlargement and curb cuts what triggered the need for the GCL waiver as far as DOB is concerned? Or was it the proposed change in use, because they actually don't even know what use they're going to be putting in here, they just know they're changing the use. So what actually triggered DOB to say come for GCL waiver, because the building is existing with an existing relationship to the street? So I don't really understand that. There's a builder's pavement plan of the 50-foot portion of Sharretts Road only, but it is very difficult to read, so please submit a clear one. And it's unknown how wide Sharretts Road is at that point and the width of the sidewalk that will be improved for the project. On these GCL 36 applications, we require a builder's pavement plan for the unmapped portions, so those streets that are being proposed as your access way. And we require that they comply with DOT standards, so they should provide that. What's a little confusing about this application is there seems to be 2 unmapped routes. One is this sort of interior private roadway. That's what fire department is looking at in terms of how it accesses where parking is allowed, where its turnaround is, and so on. But in fact, there's also access to this building along Marjorie Street, which is existing access plus these new curb cuts and the extension on the building. So what I can't really figure out is, it seems like, for one, Marjorie Street needs to have a builder's pavement plan too, because that street is a mess. And so in that case, they would need to improve 50% of Marjorie and provide curbs and sidewalks and so on to meet DOT standards. And then the next part of it is, so the building is existing facing Marjorie, but it's not clear what the depth, what currently is of the front yard and how the truck docks actually work, but there's individual curb cuts proposed to each dock, and the front yard is 19 foot 7 inches, and I didn't look up what the length of a truck is, and I don't know whether the trucks pull into these spaces or whether they just load from the rear in front of the spaces, probably load from the rear in front of the spaces. So I didn't know whether 19 foot 7 front yard is deep enough to prevent the trucks from leaning over across the property line, exceeding the property line. So hanging over it. So, and it isn't clear from the drawings what portion of Marjorie Street already exists. You can look at it from the photographs, but you can't tell from the drawings what already exists. That needs to be clarified, and they need to show the wider context. So as I said, a sidewalk should be provided, as there is one on the other side of Marjorie, assuming fire department is okay with that, because it'll narrow the access route. And the issue is certainly not to compromise access to the other buildings on Marjorie that exist, which street dead ends to this site. And I don't know whether fire department was aware of that context in this application, because the focus of its comments are entirely on that driveway that accesses from Sharrett's Road. But when you have all those trucks loading from Marjorie Street, and you have other uses that have to access Marjorie Street as their sole access, fire department should be looking at. Fire department conditionally signed off on this. Those conditions should be incorporated in our resolution. I note that the plans already respond to those comments and suggest adding a no parking sign at the 30-foot wide access entrance as well, because the drawing shows parking on one side of the street and no parking on the other, but there's no sign that says no parking. And that's in response to fire department's comment that the roadway needs to be maintained clear. DEP. And then DEP also in September of last year had many comments, and I don't know whether the applicant satisfied them. And those are my comments.
Yeah, there was a submission made by the engineer this morning, so.
Oh, this morning.
February 22nd.
Okay, well,
Yeah, so.
that's a submission to respond to DEP.
Yeah.
Right, so obviously
Yeah.
DEP couldn't have signed off on that. Okay. Any other comments on this?
Item number 19, 2018-178A, 2 Oak Tree Way, also known as 300 Terrace, Ocean Terrace, Staten Island.
We have proof of notice of hearing to officials. We need the community board recommendation. We need to I think we should reach out to city planning about what I'm calling the chicken and egg issue. The statement of fact states that city planning won't approve the natural area certifications and authorizations before we approve the GCL waiver. I don't see why that is, but even if it is, DCP had many comments in their February 2017 letter.
Oh, you do have it, okay.
And the site would have to satisfy their comments before we can decide on this. Their comments were really excellent and showed very careful analysis, even of sewer drainage and so on. And they are directing us to look at the drainage, which of course we can't do, which is one reason why city planning should probably be looking at this first. The only thing we can do is refer it to DEP, who takes kind of they do take a look, but, you know, it's recommendations. And by the way, in terms of city planning's letter, it merely states that city planning can't vote before the GCL waiver is approved, right? It doesn't say that DCP can't certify the application as complete prior to BSA approval. So I would say that's where it should go. And then the commission votes after we do. That part I don't have a problem, but city planning had a lot of very important comments on this project. In addition, city planning directed the applicant to find out whether access from Woodhaven Avenue, which is also called Woodvale, were possible instead of creating another private roadway to this house. And that way it would avoid the house behind a house issue, which is very controversial in this area. So the applicant needs to do the research. I would begin, if I were doing the research, with finding out who owns the adjacent Lot 370 that would connect the site to Woodhaven. This lot has 5 feet 7 or something that touches Woodhaven, but it obviously needs more width, and that would be from Lot 370. There's also a 2015 declaration of restrictions in favor of DEC to protect the wetland adjacent area. That was never recorded. So I don't understand how you go into an agreement with DEC and then you never record the declaration. What was the agreement with DEC with respect to this? I'd actually like us to reach out to DEC and find out whether it should have been recorded, because the sort of the deal in the restrictive declaration is DEC issued a permit allowing the development of this house. So arguably, they could proceed without having recorded this, and DEC would have no teeth, right? The fire department also issued a conditional approval in January of 2017. I'd like to know whether all those issues were addressed. I don't see, for instance, there was supposed to be a cross easement created to access it from the proposed route, as opposed to if there's an alternate through Woodhaven. DEP also had comments in December 2018. I don't know if those were addressed. We don't have a DEP sign-off. Anybody else?
No, I had similar question with regards to the Woodhaven Avenue easement and the comments that were raised by the city planning staff. If the applicant has addressed those and specifically has it considered the option that was recommended by city planning with regards to access, alternate access point.
I do want to add, while I saw the argument for the hardship argument in the response to comments, I think adding something along the lines of that, requiring a mapping action for one single addition would be unreasonable, and that's or impractical. That'd be a hardship, but something along that line of reasoning would be much more responsive.
Mm-hmm.
Did you receive an email? The applicant submitted an email to me, and it was supposed to have been forwarded to you guys, so, on Oak Tree, did you see that? Probably not.
I don't know.
Not yet, probably, right? He's saying the DEP letter, December 11th, this is from Phil Rampuller, 2018, second paragraph states there are no sanitary sewers or storm sewers on Ocean Terrace. That means the proposed single-family detached house will be required to install a private on-site sanitary septic system. As per attached, the attached email from Rocco De Filippis, the engineer of Wall and Amara, dated 9/12/2017, over 2 years ago. So the attached on-site private septic system, an on-site private septic system is required. The attached drawing is a schematic of the septic system prepared by Mr. De Filippis to serve this one-family house. We chose not to file with DEP at this time. The reason we chose not to file with DEP is that a septic approval is only good for 2 years. After 2 years, the septic percolation tests have to be performed again. Given that Department of City Planning requested GCL approval before moving the pending natural area application forward, we were sure to exceed the 2-year time period. After BSA renders a decision, we have to continue on with city planning. By examining the percolation tests for dry wells, which do not expire, the septic system will meet the percolation criteria. I trust this addresses the board's concerns. Thank you, Phil Rampulla.
So the short answer is we don't review DEP questions, and unless we have a DEP okay with that approach, we don't have a DEP sign-off. It says DEP on their letter will continue GCL 36 review upon receiving the proposed plans, so the things that they asked for in their letter. So they asked for a drainage plan. The applicant must submit a letter from the BP's office for the status of the street, a CCO. In addition, the applicant must submit a copy of the certified site connection proposal showing how the internal sanitary drain is connected to the city's sewer and storm water will be discharged from the property. They must submit an internal water main plan, water service showing connection to the city water main. So all of those things need to be responded to in some way where DEP is satisfied. Otherwise, this is that's why I say it's the chicken and the egg. You can't have us just approving things without any other agency signing off when all the other agencies had issues with the project, right? So, anybody else? Okay.
Decision item, zoning calendar, item number 20, 15715BZ, 3925 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn.
So, as anticipated, I have to say, applicant failed to get an accurate submission in on time, so we'll adjourn. Applicant's management of this case has been, I'd have to say, his words, less than what one would expect. And I would just say, this will be the 6th adjournment, and most of those adjournments were because the applicant didn't respond to direction from this board.
Okay, continued hearings, item number 12, 4311BZ, 1926 East 21st Street, Brooklyn.
This is item 21, not 12.
21, what did I say, 12?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm ignoring the numbers, I'm just looking
I'm sorry.
at yeah.
I say 12 for, it's weird.
Yeah, you did say 12, and
Dyslexic.
since I was lost anyway. Okay, the drawings were revised. I just wanted to have our counsel, so Chase Vine, verify that the errors he identified at the August 13th hearing were corrected, because the comments at the last were that all kinds of errors are in the materials and they're not coordinated. Other than that, I thought we were there, but it's not okay to not review your submissions and coordinate and check on the work by others. And I direct this to the attorneys who represent their clients and are in charge of handling the work by the consultants and coordinating everything. I did, for example, find a discrepancy on my own between the existing and the proposed perimeter wall height. And since the front of the building isn't proposed to be changed, I don't understand why there is a difference. So I didn't even have the list that Chase was looking at, and I found that one quickly. And as was pointed out, if we could find these problems so quickly, why can't counsel for the property owner? I just don't understand it. Anyway.
Do you want me to go over the issues?
Did you find?
Yes.
Okay, you went through it.
So the existing floor area on the zoning form is stated as 2,768 square feet in FA residential, and then 2,475 in floor area total. However, the existing plans differ in that the existing floor area on the plans is stated as 2,943 square feet with a 368 square foot deduction for attic accessory use, with the total floor area on the plans at 2,475. That 368 square foot deduction does not explain the difference between the two numbers, and they are inconsistent as to the zoning form and the existing plans.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Making progress, only 2 problems, right? By the way, we shouldn't be the ones who are finding these issues. And the reason that it comes up is because as council works on the resolution and they try to find just the simple thing to fill in, what is the existing floor area? And then the answer is, it's that, or that, or that, or maybe it's this. And it's not okay, right? More than not okay.
Move on?
Yeah.
Item number 22, 23115BZ, 5278 Post Road, the Bronx. We have a request for adjournment, although a submission was made on Friday.
Yeah, so,
And then he
but it
has-
wasn't even a complete submission, so they're just kind of trying to, I don't know what. So this is the second, let's see, there were 2 postponements on this case. Came here initially at hearing in August of last year with 2 postponed hearings and 1 adjournment already. So I would like to send a warning letter. It was only heard once in February. There's been more than enough time to respond to the board's comments. I get the impression that this is one of those situations where they're trying to sell the land and they're trying to preserve their place here. Only one more chance.
And the community board has asked that they be laid over after the Jewish holidays,
October 24th.
October 24th?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes.
Item number 23, 2016-4239BZ, 180 Manson Avenue, Staten Island. This application is submitted a request to withdraw.
Right, so I just wanted to state that I don't know whether, this was a special permit to allow an existing building to be used as eating and drinking. My impression is it's already being used as eating and drinking. I don't know if that's the case. I think we should check that. But if it is, then obviously if they withdraw.
It's a legalization.
It was a legalization. I'm just not sure. I didn't have a chance to kind of really check what's going on here, so we need to check, and if it is, then we need to advise DOB. Okay?
Okay. Item number 24, 2016-4465BZ, 129 Anderson Street, Staten Island. Received a request for adjournment, but they have submitted a documentation from the building. They submitted an application to DOF for a map change or something?
Whatever, okay.
I don't know. Well, they were concerned it's the third adjournment, and now there's another
Yeah, they
adjournment.
should be concerned. So what I want to say is, this is an additional adjournment request after we already said that the June adjournment is the last, and a dismissal warning letter went out to council and owner at that time. This has been heard only once, exactly a year ago, and came to the BSA in 2016 with a dismissal warning in 2018. The purported need for the adjournment is a tax map apportionment, which according to the document was submitted to Department of Finance on August 22nd of 2019. And so I want to dismiss this case either for failure to prosecute or on the merits as commissioners prefer. Enough already. If you don't prosecute, you're done. You don't just get to stay here indefinitely until you decide what you want to do with your property. Okay.
Item number 25, 2017-265BZ, 318, 320 54th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, they request an adjournment until late December to amend the application to request a Section 7353 special permit. Having just looked at this type of special permit with two other cases very recently, the applicant really needs to verify that it can make the findings before submitting the application to save everyone a lot of money and heartache. Please make sure you can make the findings. So Jella, if you could reach out to Ms. Simons and say, please go through all the findings. Please make sure you can make them before you file. Okay? Because we just dispatched two cases where it was impossible for them to make the findings. And in this case, because it's an R6B zoning district, they can't enlarge as of right, a manufacturing type use as of right. So.
Item number 26, 2018-95BZ, 120 Avenue M, Brooklyn.
The plans were revised to show a different facade system without a living wall, which is a really nice thing, but it doesn't work in New York. So they replaced it by using some variety in the treatment of the masonry to break up the apparent mass. I'd say it is an art, but it's better than nothing and better than dead plants. So a roof plan was provided as requested. Restrictive declaration was also provided committing to shuttle bus service and recording of the deck prior to permit. And there was one error where they referred, did you reach out to them already?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So there's just one error in the restrictive deck that can be corrected in 2 seconds. So they should do that and resubmit it. And that's it. Any other comment?
That's a secret. Oh, we're finished with secret, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we finished everything.
Yeah, sorry. Item number 27, 2018-104BZ, 1234, 1238 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. This is the fourth hearing on this, plus one adjournment representing 5 review periods of, for me, pure frustration over the insistence by the applicant to ignore or cherry pick the board's instructions. I just want to add that most of my admonition about applicants is about the same applicant's rep. I admit that I may be overreacting at this point due to exhaustion and frustration on this case. The new plans were submitted that bear no resemblance to the demolition drawings submitted on March 22nd, and no revised demo plans were provided. I count 44% of existing exterior walls maintained on the exterior of the first floor and less on the second floor. And bits of walls don't count in this exercise, which is intended to maintain in place the existing building and enlarge it, not to effectively demolish it. The house is now even more massive than it was in March and reads, I think, less like 2 houses than it did before, because before at least the second house was set back. So when I said there's no reason for the rear yard waiver for the second house, I didn't say move the house so it lines up and you get the same amount of floor area. The FAR is still 8,000 square feet. I thought that it would reduce the size of the house. We directed that the building be made smaller to be more in line with the largest building in the neighborhood that is only 6,400 square feet. We also directed that the second floor has no need to enclose on the required rear yard, given the massiveness of the house. And the attic plan belies the fact that the roof covers the entire structure, which is not being counted as floor area and is shown as such in section and elevation. So the roof plan is showing that there's only a portion of it that's occupiable space, but then you look at the section and you look at not the roof plan, the attic plan shows there's only a small area of occupiable space, and then you look at the roof plan, you look at the elevations, and you see that the roof continues all the way across. And so it's just kind of arbitrary, frankly. The front yard studies show front yards typically at 17 to 19 feet, while the proposed reduces it to 15 feet, and given the building's massiveness, that will make the building appear even, that the front yard feel tighter. It's not that there are no 15-foot front yards, but when you're building such a big house, then it's kind of leaning over onto the street. So something's got to give. That's why pulling that house, the second house back, was accomplishing at least some more openness there. It's kind of like the architect did exactly the opposite of what was directed. The frontage study shows no buildings with frontage as wide as 58 feet, which this one has. And if the subject building were to be treated to read as if 2 separate houses, as we instructed them to do, space between them would need to be deeper and less massive, rather than the mere gesture that's provided that's almost like a reveal, actually. I personally don't understand actually why not keep both existing houses and make a connection between them and enlarge one and enlarge the other and make a connection, or connect one to the other with a more delicate link that continues vertically and horizontally through the building, which, by the way, is an architectural treatment that is almost as old as architecture. I personally would like to close this and vote. I oppose this project for failure to make the findings. Insufficient existing building walls are being retained, and the house is massive and will change the character of the neighborhood. We've been at this too long, and the applicant refuses to do as instructed, and I just want to close. And if they want to come back at another time, having thought carefully about the errors in their ways, they're welcome to come back, but we can't keep doing this. So
I know I had raised the question with regards to providing a much more clearer separation between the 2 front wall articulation. I don't think I ever advised that the front of the building be moved forward. That does make the building appear much more massive than in the initial iteration. We wanted the same distance maintained, the horizontal distance maintained, but wanted a bigger space between those two vertical elements. And I have the same concern with regards to the front yard. I mean, none of the buildings here have such narrow front yard, even though that is the minimum permitted. So I'm not sure how, by moving the building front, addresses one of the neighborhood character issues.
Anyone else?
I agree with the chair and the vice chair. The proposal, I believe, is an affront to the character of the community. The proposal, I believe, is an affront to the character of the community. Although I would offer the applicant the opportunity to withdraw as opposed to voting on the merits.
Yes. I would recommend that, withdraw, regroup, rethink how it should be done, and come back in due course with either, I don't know which thing needs to be more cooperative, which consultant needs to be more cooperative, but cooperation needs to be the theme. Otherwise, and I actually feel for the owner, how long this has been going on, since January. Submitted in June of last year. Okay.
Item number 28, 2018-109BZ, 9-03, 44th Road, Queens.
So this application was delayed because school safety has had many problems, or has many problems, with the proposed conditions that included many active curb cuts all the way around the building. The applicant has been working closely with school safety, which is great, and submitted something to them as recently as September 11th, so we don't yet have school safety sign-off, to my knowledge. And
We had
DO...
another submission on Friday, too.
Oh, and another
School
submission?
safety
Okay.
sent not a
9/11.
letter, but an email requesting the auto turn.
I'm sorry, start again.
Yeah,
because-
speak into the mic.
Speak into the
Sorry.
mic.
So school safety sent another follow-up email on Friday because the applicant responded to the September 3rd letter with an auto turn analysis, and they want the curb extensions and auto turn analysis redone because they don't think it exactly meets the DOT standards.
Okay,
So they're looking at that right now from Friday.
okay. Okay, and that's on you'll eventually load that into the folder, right? Yeah, okay. And also DOT had open issues with respect to traffic analysis in the EAS and pedestrian safety alert systems. Meanwhile, in response to both board comments and DOT comments, the building has been totally redesigned and will now be the three existing recently built stories instead of 9 in total, where it's 6 built new on top of the existing for the school, and with only shared school/commercial first floor and exclusively school the second and third floors, which vastly simplifies our concerns about children's safety within the building. And the site plan shows bulb outs at the sidewalks to create clear lay-by lanes devoted to drop-offs at both 44th Road and 10th Street. Whether that narrows the travel lane too much is DOT's department. I did see there was some comment by the traffic consultant acknowledging the narrowing and some kind of explanation for why that's okay, but that's a DOT question. And now the entrance to the school is absolutely free of curb cuts and loading docks, which used to be right adjacent to the entrance, and absent any direct access to the commercial spaces on that street frontage where the school is. There is only one place of potential interaction, which I actually don't understand the reason for having. That is the rear door to all of the commercial spaces that share the egress from the gym and fire stairs that serve the school. Why not just construct a parallel egress corridor for the commercial? The way it is now, the possibility of interaction between students and strangers in the hallway is actually great, since it is the only direct means of egress to the street for the gym. and will likely even be used, for example, on fire drill days, and I don't know what else. So it's also a direct means of access to the rear of the commercial spaces from 44th Avenue, so might end up being used as a convenience access. And building another corridor is nothing, and the building is under construction, so I don't know why that isn't just done, and then that would solve the problem. I'd like to know how the roof setbacks will be accessed at the second floor. Will there be no access for the school to use that, for example, as gardening or seating areas? They're too narrow to be playgrounds. So, and I don't know if the air quality analysis prohibits that, but they're too narrow to be playgrounds, so it's not like you're going to really have kids running back and forth, I don't think, especially if it's set up as a greenhouse area or something. I'm just curious because the windows are looking out on this rooftop. However, the statement of facts describes building finishes, finished materials, and I said at the last hearing that no exterior insulated finishing system known
building
in
is
the trade.
cladded.
The building is cladded would be permitted, so, but that's what I wanted to know. What the description is in the statement of facts, it sounds like ephes, not the wood, but the exterior insulating cladding material. I do understand that this is tenant space, but the landlord is benefiting from our approval and so on. So I don't know what is cladded with. The drawings show brick at one point and something unknown at this other point.
I went by the other day and it looked like brick.
Okay. But even up on the upper level?
Yeah, the entire building is,
Okay, so they could speak to that.
they can clarify that.
We have an AI form, additional information form from DOB that was submitted to DOB indicating that the building as constructed complies with, quote, FEMA, quote, standards, although oddly that is known as Appendix G in New York City, and the AI only cites to the zoning resolution, section 64, et cetera. So I would ask the architect to verify that both the zoning and Appendix G standards are the same for a school as they are for a commercial building, and that both requirements, both sets of requirements are met. For example, and the reason that I bring this up is under Appendix G, a school is classified as a high hazard 3 occupancy as compared to a lower hazard occupancies for things like minor storage facilities. And actually, this building would be classified as a lower hazard 2 occupancy. So there were notes that were revised on drawing A102 that seemed to indicate that they revised the firm map to be the current one, which has an AE11, and indicates that it's occupancy class 3 and design flood elevation 12. So I think they comply. I just want the architect to just so state, right? Because the DOB letter doesn't say that it looked at everything, which is what we asked them to do. So, and the building's built, so. The EAS was revised and submitted on August 22nd, and I believe we still have open noise, air quality, open noise and air quality with hazmat, WRP, and landmark sign-off, correct? Okay. Landmarks always looks at archaeological, and in one case, actually found had an archaeological hit, and will require a dig site. Not this one, on another site.
Okay, I had,
Yeah.
I had a couple of comments. Oh, yes. Entrance to the school travel path from the bus and the subway station is more direct, and this would minimize the conflict with the proposed warehouse operation and school entrance, so that's a big positive element. However, I did have some questions. The analysis seemed to have focused mostly of access coming from, traffic coming from 44th Drive and 44th Road, and it did not factor in the traffic or especially pedestrian movement coming from Vernon Boulevard, both from the south and to the north. There is a bus stop on Vernon Boulevard, so those students who would be coming from Vernon Boulevard, from the north side, from Astoria or from Hunters Point, where there is a growing residential population, that pedestrian connection and the footwork, how students will navigate from there to the entrance has not been looked at. And specifically, I'm concerned about the intersections of 9th Street and 44th Road and Vernon Boulevard. And will the projected pedestrian flow, and what is the projected pedestrian flow from the bus stop at Vernon Boulevard and 44th Avenue? If it is high, please consider adding designated flaggers. We just found out about this new terminology, and I believe the property owner for this is the same as that school, so he should be familiar with this term. Designated flagger for 44th Avenue, as has been proposed for the Clinton Avenue School, and also providing additional crossing guard or school safety officer at the intersection of 9th Street and 44th Drive and Vernon Boulevard.
Are you adding to their school safety plan? Like,
These are my questions, and I think these questions should be raised with the school safety plan. It is in addition to.
Okay.
Because I think the focus has been mostly from
They have a
44th.
passive pedestrian detection system.
Yeah.
But that's for the cars coming out, those are the
Yeah.
trucks coming out of the building.
Yeah, I'm talking about pedestrians. There is a bus stop at the corner of Vernon Boulevard and 44th Avenue. And with the growing residential population that is to the south of 44th Drive in Hunters Point South and in the upland portion of Long Island City, I anticipate and I hope that's what they're targeting, is a lot of students from there will be coming, walking or will be taking the bus, or there is a city bike storage right there. So combination of any of those would be used. So there would be, I think, and I would like the data to tell me otherwise, that the pedestrian flow from that direction.
I thought they were going to have a school safety officer designated for 9th Street and 44th Avenue.
But the vehicles, so the problem is the intersection of Vernon Boulevard and 9th Street, it converges at 9th Street. And that intersection is a little bit of a tricky intersection. So just having, I do not know.
Isn't that 44th Road?
This is 44th Road
Right.
and 9th Street. The bus stop is right here.
So
by Vernon.
I
I just
think
want
what
to-
the issue is, and we had this with another school on Fordham Road or on Jerome Avenue, something like that, where they actually had crossing guards that were further away from the school. I think the proposal is crossing guards that are still on the main tax block, as opposed to across the street or at that intersection. I'm not sure we can verify, but I think what Commissioner Shand is suggesting is they need to have sort of safety ensured between the bus stop and when they first cross over, whatever that one is, 49th Street to come to the school block.
And I would say similarly for those students who are coming from Queensbridge housing and the north, they will be coming from Vernon Boulevard either by bus or walking. It's very walkable, and what is the pedestrian flow that is being counted turning south from Vernon
Oh,
Boulevard?
so you want somebody here
Also-
as well as
Yeah.
over on 9th?
Right.
Because
So that-
right now, they're having somebody here.
Right.
Yes.
So you want somebody here as well?
Here
Okay.
is, so for the record, here is what?
Here is Vernon
Vernon.
Boulevard and 44th Avenue. And similarly for Vernon Boulevard and 44th Road, because of the geometry of the intersection there.
I thought they said they had that. That's what my notes say, that there is somebody on Vernon Boulevard and 44th
Okay.
Avenue.
So if the applicant could clarify that.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably the easiest would be, because it's hard to know which side of the street do you mean and so on, if they could bring the diagram and point to where they're proposing to have the guards, and then you could say, no, but, you know, I actually mean this intersection, because right now they're listening to this, and we're saying over here, over there, and they don't know what we mean by that.
So they have a diagram in the EAS?
Yes, no, what I'm saying is, put the diagram on the blackboard, on the whiteboard, and show us where they're proposing the guards, and then we could comment that maybe another guard or another kind of indicator should be added to the question.
It's on page 158.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is, we can't talk in the air. We need to talk with something concrete on the wall. So I'm instructing them, and they're nodding in agreement that they'll come with a diagram, and that way we can all be talking together about the
They
same
have a school
diagram.
safety officer,
Okay, good.
yeah, okay. No, we're just noting that they have a school safety officer up on the corner.
At 44th and
Avenue.
Vernon.
Okay.
Right,
do?
but then you could say 44th and Vernon on which side of the street?
Well,
Right.
I think,
So crossing
Yeah, yeah.
guard crosses the street.
Yeah, well, that's
Right.
right, okay. Well, but it,
and the street is not going through, it terminates at
okay.
So,
all right. True, because they're
That's
crossing
buried, I
across.
know, it's buried.
It's a new title.
Okay, anybody else on this?
Okay. Item number,
I do want to say, though, I think it's great that they're really cooperating so closely with school safety, because this started off a much different kind of a project.
no, there was a couple of meetings.
No, I understood, but we don't always have that level of cooperation, so that's.
Yeah. Item number 29, 2018-168 BZ, 1769 East 26th Street, Brooklyn.
Sorry, it's a little loud. Okay. As requested, the rear yard incursion has been reduced to 3 feet at all 4 floors, leaving a 27-foot rear yard in deference to the neighbors who have very deep rear yards. One neighbor to the rear testified in opposition to this application. The third floor addition is very tall, with a 14-foot floor-to-roof peak height. I'd like to know the reason for that. The result is a house that towers over its immediate neighbors. The height should be brought down using a shallower slope that is more similar to the neighboring houses. That's the other thing. These houses all have kind of, not flat, but very shallow slope peaks. And this house, for whatever reason, has this enormous sort of Tudor type of peak, or maybe it's more like the tower, Rapunzel Tower peak. And I don't know for what purpose, and doesn't go with the neighborhood. The lot coverage study, which was finally provided, though requested in the notice of comments in November, shows the 42% lot coverage in line with many of the neighbors on the block. The planting diagram should also indicate compliance with percentages in section, that are required in section 23-451, which is 25% of the front yard that has a 30-foot frontage. I do think it complies, though. When I did the math, I think it complies, but always it should indicate compliance on the front yard. There's a notation on the first floor plan that says, quote, 7-foot existing front yard. I think that's one of those flying notes that shouldn't be on the drawing, because it makes no sense. There isn't a 7-foot existing front yard, it's 10 feet. And the dimension of 7 feet measures to nowhere. So I think that's just a flying mistake. So it needs to be removed quickly, like do it now. And I would like to, in this case, compliment this architect for providing a very clear and complete set of drawings, which we may end up using as a model for others. So, anybody else? Okay.
Item number 30, 2018-171 BZ, 1 East 70th Street, Manhattan. Is this correct?
Yes. Scrolling. A lot of notes on this. Okay. We have a June 6th submission of opposition's proposed alternatives to the Frick's proposal. These drawings are all dated before our last hearing on June 4th, during which we discussed these alternative suggestions, which, as discussed, fall short of the Frick's programmatic requirements, critical adjacencies, and minimum room sizes, and can't take into account field conditions and client-to-expert needs analyses about which an outside architect is unaware, kind of in defense of the architect who's doing this, that he's not privy to the kinds of things that an architect-client relationship is. This is a complex building with many complicated existing conditions that must be accommodated in the renovations. Owners' council and architects submitted a detailed written and diagrammatic review of those plans on June 19th, describing how they do not fulfill the Frick's programmatic needs. I note, as I did at an earlier hearing, that the Frick's current proposal looks, in terms of massing, very much like the Halpern 2015 proposal, which was prepared in response to a much larger and more aggressive renovation and enlargement plan, which the Frick later abandoned. That 2015 proposal was submitted to this board on March 19th, 19, as an acceptable alternative that by the opposition. So it seems to me that the Frick has made enormous efforts to be responsive to community concerns about this project while maintaining a viable expansion and renovation project. And when I talk about this, I'm reminded of the Whitney, where I was on the community board during the Whitney hearings, the Whitney Uptown, which used to be considered the Whitney, where community opposition to that project ultimately resulted in the approval by this board and the Landmarks Commission of a building, of an addition that was so small that it was no longer viable, hence the Whitney moved downtown. So, the goal isn't to sort of crunch the applicant to the point where it's not a viable project anymore, and so they're just kind of wasting their money. In response to the owner's architect's review of the proposed alternative plans, opposition counsel submits a 15-page letter criticizing, rather rudely I thought, but criticizing the architect's analysis with 300 pages of exhibits and yet another set of alternative drawings dated July 3rd. I note that at the first floor, the alternative now looks much like the Frick's proposal, but at the second floor, all of the Frick's programmatic adjacencies, museum shop, lobby, cafe, technical support spaces, etc., have been eliminated in favor of additional special exhibition rooms that are isolated from the first floor and surrounded by inefficient and useless circulation rather than gathering space. The alternative also requires a great deal of additional excavation at subcellar 2 and 3. I need to say that the board cannot entertain an endless stream of alternative ideas. Opposition's architect cannot possibly understand the intricacies involved in designing this project because, as it well knows, it has not participated in the site surveys and program planning meetings that are involved in understanding any client's needs and any field conditions. If opposition architect wants to offer a specific viable alternative to a given solution that addresses all of the issues, that's one thing, but it shouldn't be unpacking the entire project, in my view. Useful criticism can improve a project, but I don't think these are constructive ideas at this point. I agree that it would be very nice if the architects could meet to discuss these issues, but the BSA cannot require that, so that can go on someplace else. I think the Frick has demonstrated programmatic need and a minimum variance necessary to afford relief. I should note that the board's charge is to waive the zoning regulations, and I'm not sure that opposition's proposals actually reduce the number of requested waivers. It doesn't actually, other than maybe the height in the center portion. So we have also June 17th submissions by opposition counsel concerning construction impacts. As these concerns were previously raised and forwarded to DEP for its consideration, we did not also forward these letters to DEP. The environmental engineers at DEP are experts and know how to ask the relevant questions of the owner's environmental engineers once presented with the area of environmental concern requiring further study. I add, this is not an interpretive appeal. It is an application by the Frick for a variance. As such, the community's concerns are heard and taken into account during the deliberative process, our deliberative process. However, the community is not a co-applicant. BSA, in concert with its sister agencies, is taking BSA, in concert with its sister agencies, is taking a hard look at all areas of environmental concern that have been identified by this agency, its sister agencies, the applicant, and opposition counsel. Seeker review is still in process, although we do have sign-off on DEP on water sewer, DOT on transportation, parks on open space, city planning on land use, zoning, public policy, and neighborhood character, and community facilities and socioeconomic conditions. Did I leave anything out?
Yeah.
We also reached, and if there's anything after I'm finished that recently come in, let me know. We also reached out to LPC and the SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, about the music room. LPC has determined that the music room is not eligible for designation as an interior landmark, although the entire building is an individual landmark subject to their review. SHPO advises in its August 26th letter that the building is listed on the state and national register and as such is considered as an entirety. In other words, such listing does not distinguish between interior and exterior landmark status. However, unless the building requires state or federal permitting, licensing, or funding, no restrictions are placed on its use by the state or federal agencies in charge of that subject. So I know that opposition counsel wants us to do some kind of independent further review of this question, but we reached out to the two agencies that we have access to who are experts in the subject of historic preservation, and they advise us that, that the music room does not rise to the level of something that would need to be individually protected. I personally would love to see the music room kept, but I'm persuaded that the programmatic needs require the layout as it is. And by the way, as I said at a prior hearing, the music room is not part of our waiver. So what they're doing on their interior is that falls beneath height limits, rear yard limits, lot coverage, and so on. It's not implicated in any of those. So the waiver is not relevant to whether the music room stays or goes. The reason that I'm talking about it is from the seeker review perspective. Okay.
I don't know if you mentioned DOT, but they also signed off on transportation impact. I
Yes,
don't know if you
I said that.
Oh, okay.
I said
Okay.
DEP on water sewer, DOT on transportation, parks on open space, city planning on land use, zoning, public policy, neighborhood character, community facilities, socioeconomic condition.
And they, DEP signed off on hazmat.
Oh, we have hazmat sign off.
Yeah.
That's including, but for construction also?
For
or-
construction.
Oh,
For
so that's something we
construction.
just got?
It was received via email correspondence on September 5th, 2019. It wasn't an official letter, but it was an email saying they had no further comments.
Wait a minute, so they signed
wanted
off
con-
on hazmat
Yes.
generally, but with
And
respect to the
construction.
construction aspects,
Yes.
what's the date of that letter?
It's an email dated September 5th, 2019.
Okay.
They wanted consistency. They were mostly reviewing for consistency between the hazmat chapter and the construction chapter. And then they were also reviewing for air quality, and we received an email that they didn't have any more, they didn't have any more air quality concerns, but that perhaps a final letter would be coming with the noise letter,
Okay.
so,
So we don't yet have the air quality and noise on construction
like an
impact?
official.
Yeah, we need the official
Yeah.
letter from them. Okay. All right. Anybody else on this one?
I concur with you fully.
Yeah, I just want to restate that, that this is a modest request in light of what the conditions that became clear during our walkthrough. They need, they have a real need for this type of variance.
I just wanted to say that although the opposition has given us various iterations and alternative designs, I feel that the applicant's own plans and design most directly responds to their programmatic need.
Okay. May I move on, or you want to wait?
Wait a second, let me just finish this. Okay.
New cases on the zoning calendar, item number 1, 2018-27BZ, 16 Dover Street, Brooklyn.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials' neighbors. Community Board recommends approval with 2 opposed. We have 2 letters of strong opposition from neighbors to the rear, opposing to legalizing and increasing the size of the extension. Both of those neighbors have small lots with complying rear yards. This property was the subject of a 1985 variance, so I immediately jump in my head to the minimum variance necessary to afford relief question, which they accomplished in 1985 with an amply large house, which the owners then chose to illegally overbuild. The other option is the abandonment of the variance where no non-compliant conditions permitted by the variance can be relied on for the 73-622. In the first place, it appears that the house is out of compliance with the terms of the variance as to side yards, floor area, and rear yard. So I also feel like this application is awarding bad actors, although it may not have been these owners who did the deed. In any event, in order to do this, in order to have this application, we need a set of drawings that shows what would have existed absent such waivers under the variance. So complying rear and side yards and complying floor area, lot coverage, and height, unless there were legal pre-existing conditions in 1961 that can be demonstrated, but I think there was a new house, so demolition, I'm not sure. We can then take it from there and see what can be legalized. This proposal, this idea may be a problem since, as I understand it, the building has non-complying perimeter wall and overall height, which this board doesn't have the authority to waive under the permit. That then calls into question whether 50% of the existing perimeter walls can be retained on the perimeter and 50% of existing joists can be retained. The proposal already gobbles up the side and front of the house for the addition, which may no longer be possible with removal of the rear addition from the equation. So if you can't count the rear addition, you can't count those walls as existing. The 8-foot strip at the rear is described as, quote, an easement on the drawings, but the 2004 deed indicates perhaps, that would be a title company determination, that the owner owns that property. Isn't it therefore part of the zoning lot and or tax lot? The tax map and 2015 survey don't appear to agree that it is owned in fee by the owner. And the variance described it as a, quote, effective 20-foot rear yard, which isn't the same thing as a rear yard. So that needs to be clarified. The way you clarify that as a title company, a council opines on what the ownership situation is of that area at the back. That also holds for the 10-foot easement along the side. A side yard is measured from the property line, not an easement line. Note to commissioners that the proposed, because this was very big, all this folder, I just want to note to the commissioners that the proposed drawings are in the May 7th, 19th submission folder and not the application folder for whatever reason. The most obvious way to accomplish this application without too much headache, but I foretell headache, is to remove the portion of the building at the rear to allow 20 feet from the rear property line at the first floor. And the client's protest shouldn't be so extreme with respect to that direction, since the owner acknowledges the illegal construction will be removed, so that's doing violence to the house already. And anyway, the proposed project nearly demolishes the existing house. So actually, because the proposed project is such an enormous modification to an existing house, you could easily remove the non-compliant conditions and bring the house into a state of compliance, and then we have something to work from a 73-622 point of view. Given opposition from the neighbors at the rear, owner should be more respectful in the design and more conservative in the scope of the ask. This is already a very big house. They need to provide a floor area and frontage study as well, because it's a big ask and a big building. and that all yards should be measured from the property line depicted on the survey unless the title company and the surveyor, because by the way, the surveyor has to agree with the title company, agree and the survey is amended. Anybody else on this?
I had similar question and concern. Basically, this application seems like it's a legalization of an illegal construction and in addition, allow for enlargement, which is not retaining the 50% threshold requirement. I also was not quite clear with the statement that the applicant had made that the enlargement sought under the variance application could have been granted under ZR 73-622 special permit, as the resolution notes that the approved rear yard is 20 feet due to the fact that the easement was included as part of the 20-foot rear yard, and nowhere in the plan do we see a 20-foot rear yard. So I do think that even with the easement of 8 foot for utility, if it's within it, it's not even close to 20 feet. So we need to start with that approval first, then work our way down.
Right. Also, I want to push back on that statement because we haven't allowed the easement to count as the rear yard unless the property owner has provided proof that they have purchased that easement and have incorporated it into their tax lot. And that's not the case here. So I don't understand that statement at all. But here's my question. When they show walls retained, are they going from the various plans, the variance plans to the proposed, or the pre-variance plans to the proposed?
So what I don't really know in terms of the history of this project is whether this was an enlargement of an existing house for the variance or whether it was brand new construction. So if it's brand new construction for the variance, then there was no pre-existing. And so all that I can think of in the interest of considering a 73-622 is you basically shave off all the non-compliances. You've got a structure that's just say clad in plywood, and you take it from there kind of thing. And therefore, you don't have existing walls retained, right?
Right.
So for example, if they have to slice off the rear because it's not complying, you can't count those rear walls as being retained or not retained. And ditto for the front yard or the side yards. So that's why I'm thinking, no matter how we slice it, they're not going to accomplish the 50%, but it's not like I sat down with a pencil and tried to figure it out myself.
I think it was quite obvious from the plan.
Yeah.
Right, but because the question really is where are they jumping off from? And because if it is the variance plans, once you take the illegal stuff off, then where are they coming from? That's why I'm asking the question. Like, for instance, the rear yard. Once you take off that 10-foot rear yard, that wall that's built in the wrong place, where are they coming from? The 12 feet that was approved but never built, so therefore it really isn't existing? Or do they have to go back to an as-of-right 30-foot rear yard, in which case everything is new in the back?
Right.
That's the question, because
Yeah.
then there's no way they can meet that threshold.
Right. You wanted to add something?
No, I mean, that raises a good question, is that we did grant a variance. It was not built pursuant to the variance. So does that mean the variance is?
Well, it was a non-compliant project, no, but, so what I'm suggesting here is they need to abandon the variance, because if it's an amendment of the variance, then my reaction is, you already got the minimum relief necessary, and that, if the house is a big house, right? It's bigger than a lot of your neighbors, so why would you be entitled to any further relief under a variance? So no variance, right? So then, if you want to come for a 622, then you can't rely on anything, you abandon the variance, right? So you abandon the variance, it renders all of the stuff that's there that doesn't comply with zoning illegal. Therefore, that has to be removed, and I agree. So
And you build
with what
from-
you're saying, so Commissioner Otley Brown, so we had a case like this where they ended up having to build the house after it burned down, right? And then came to us for 73-622. And at the beginning, it was so complicated, we didn't know which drawings should be looked at, but it became simple. House is built, now we have an existing legal house where, to the extent they were allowed to rebuild non-compliant conditions, they did. And to the extent that they weren't, they didn't. And now we had an existing legal house, and then we said, what do you want for 622? And then we started looking at it just like any of the other applications. So I'm thinking that's what they would have to do here. Since they're planning on doing so much demolition, demolish all the non-compliances.
And build the max as of right envelope that you can.
Yes, and
then
then.
come to us.
And then come to us.
Are you requesting that they actually demolish it and
Yeah.
build some, and would you be satisfied with them submitting plans of what it would be?
No, so that's why it's very similar to the house that burned down, where it's like the board didn't really know what to do with this. You don't have an existing house. And here, you don't have an existing legal house once the
Right.
variance is abandoned, right? So we always talk about that. We have this in a small scale often, where they added some little side thing, right? And then they say, we'll take the side thing off. And then we say, well, you can't count that sidewall as having been existing because it was illegal, so you don't get to count that towards your 50%.
Agreed.
There's so much illegal here, I don't know what they'll count towards 50%, in addition to the fact that the perimeter wall height is too great. So now you're losing height, it's major demolition. And my question is really, to the owner is,
Is this worth
is this worth it? It's a very big house. You want it to look like a different thing? And, the model seems to be what I think is an illegal building next door. There's this gigantic, what looks like a country club, and I don't think it was built pursuant to permits. So I think that's kind of house envy that's going on. But, yeah.
Item number 2, 2018-191BZ, 215 North 10th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. We approve of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval with one abstention, but for a different application that was revised since this submission and prior to a first hearing. Our first hearing. So I'd just like to know, is the difference significant? I'm not sure, really. The applicant should address that. But I think we should reach out to the community board to see if they want to hear it again after we understand what the difference is between these two. If I understand it correctly, without digging in very deeply, the main difference is that 77 parking spaces were to be provided in 2 cellars and also at grade, plus a small amount of retail. Whether the community board factored where the parking was going to be located into their approval, I don't know, because all the parking now is at grade and there's no retail, right? Statement of facts, page 3, has several errors about the number of required spaces and where there are decimals higher than 0.5, you round up, so 103 spaces for use group 6B. For example, I think that actually, in reading it further, it's their decision to write in the statement of facts to spell out the numbers, to write out, 153, instead of just having it in numerical form, messed them up, because the written out number versus the numerical don't match. And so they need to fix that. Fire department objects to the application prior to reviewing the proposed automated parking system, which they normally do, and that may have actually been one of the reasons why the project was changed, because I think it was using a parking system that's not okay with fire department, that doesn't have floors. So fire department wants to see whether this system would be okay with them. This site is very well served by public transit, so the need for parking is greatly diminished. The parking studies, however, are based on standard office use and not medical office use, which can be either use group 6B or community facility. So I wonder whether the use here should be restricted or a study for medical uses be provided as well. Because obviously the trip generation for medical office is completely different for just law firms and other kinds of offices. And so to be super conservative, they could run it for medical use, which might not look different, or be willing to put a restriction that they don't have it used for medical offices, one or the other. Plans provided label the cellar as cellar 2. There isn't a cellar 1 or a cellar. I think that's a remnant from the other drawings, so they should fix that. This site is apparently not in a flood zone, although the sections show that flood resistance construction elevation is at 9'11", NAVD 88, and mechanical equipment is being located on that floor, so they should explain the flood zone situation here. The first floor is below grade. 2007 FEMA maps show this site in an AE 10 zone, so in a flood zone. By coincidence, the Waterfront Revitalization Program Consistency Review had the same questions in their April 10th email, so I and they are concerned about that. I'd like to know whether it's correct that stackers are fitting within a 10-foot floor-to-ceiling height. They should provide more information on the stacker system, which is what fire department requested also. The EAS was resubmitted on August 28th, so we don't have agency sign-offs yet, unless we do.
They submitted one on Friday, actually.
Who
at the
submitted?
end- The applicant, at the end of the day, like around 5 PM,
Submitted what?
a revised EAS.
Oh,
And,
again.
Again, because they needed WRP review. They had some comments from WRP before. And I think that's the only interagency review they need. So that will be sent after the review session to WRP for their review.
That was the only,
I believe that was the only one that was needed, but we can double check
oh,
on it.
isn't this site in a voluntary cleanup? Yeah, this is a
Yeah.
site that's in voluntary cleanup, hence there's no hazmat review. Okay. Okay, and then on the trip generation analysis, the EIS used 17 employees and 0.9 visitors per 1,000 gross square feet, which, just by way of example, is very different from a medical facility analysis. So, but I'd like them to show the worksheet that concludes that of the something like 630 employee trips per weekday, the peak office accumulation is only 18 spaces. There was no backup for that, so I was trying to figure out how'd they get to only 18 spaces if it's 17 per 1,000. And also show the number of spaces to be provided on the plans. It doesn't actually show that. And clarify the parking layout.
Okay.
Any other comments on this one?
No.
Oh, I just wanted to say, it's not a traditional stacker.
Right.
It's a rail and cable thing that just lifts the car, and the car like hangs suspended. Cool.
Or was it? Yeah.
So it reduces a lot of the structures. I agree with you with regards to the, whether they should do a more conservative analysis of the medical or do a restriction, because the area doesn't seem like a place where you would have an office space of that size. It would be more typical of a medical office space. Because the area has grown, it has become more residential in nature, so I would say there would be more need for medical use. So I think it would benefit them.
Yeah, then maybe clarify, make it easier, just
Yeah.
choose one of those two,
Yeah.
and yeah, okay. One of those two being either study medical or go for a restriction on
Yeah.
tenancy.
Done?
Yeah.
Item number 3, 2019-23 BZ, 290 Mulberry Street, Brooklyn, Manhattan, sorry.
Yeah. This is a legalization. They opened in September of last year. We have a proof of initial hearing to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. In addition, we have proof of posting of notice in the lobby. Community Board recommends approval, and we actually have one letter in support from an upstairs neighbor who's located on the second floor, which is good. I think, did we just get DOI on this?
Yes.
Okay.
We did.
And I didn't see fire department. They need to correct the statement of facts to refer to the correct tax lot. They need to correct reference to quote, floor area in the cellar, it's known as floor space or gross square footage. And I had no other issue. Was that it, Chase? Anything else?
I believe they're going to need a public assembly permit.
Right, but that's not our,
That's not our domain.
that's not our domain in the sense that.
Purview, whatever.
Right, but it's fire department always comments on that kind of stuff.
We usually include it as a condition.
Oh, okay. Mhm. There's actually more than 75 people that fit on this little space? I'm not sure. Anyway.
So Marshall, let's do, okay.
That
that's a
says
lot of people.
75 persons proposed.
Oh, they should make it 74 and then they'd be much better. They may not know that, that's how it's done. And 75 people in a martial arts class, that sounds painful for all of the participants.
Item number 4, 2019-157BZ, 8802 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board 3 hasn't yet met on this, but I'm not sure why, since the application was submitted in May, unless they took off all the summer
I
months.
think these are the two that they took off the summer. I think they're meeting in October,
Yeah.
they're meeting
October.
September, next week,
Yeah,
next
okay.
week, if I remember, yeah.
The site looks in good shape, but many slats are missing from the fence between the site and the adjacent residential neighbor, and there are many miscellaneous signs not shown on the signage plans, the elevations, the calculations. The lumen diagram shows lumens greater than 0 at the residential property. Landscaping is sparse at the trash enclosure and at the entry to the drive-through lane. Show on the plan and install additional landscaping. The diagram shows that the menu board can be heard by the residential neighbor who should not have to be operating with a closed window condition and also might just be sitting in the side yard. So they should provide, as we've seen on so many of these applications, suitable sound attenuation on that fence. And show sound projection in section as well as in plan. The reason I say that is because these plans don't take into account that sound is broken by an obstruction. And so if we continue to see it in plan and they put up sound attenuating blanket, it would still continue through to the residents because you're doing it in plan. So in section, there's a level at which sound doesn't travel, and then the fence only needs to be whatever it is, height-wise. And then also, this is something I just don't understand. So why should the menu board be audible at all at a level of 66 dBA, 8 to 16 feet away from the menu board? Why can't menu boards be more focused towards the ordering person so it falls off dramatically? So they're really loud far away. Like I can hear, oh, he's getting a mac and cheese or wherever it is you order from a White Castle.
Be interesting with all the modern technology, if there's this little thing, you can lean out your car and just push a button.
Yeah, exactly. Or why doesn't it come out on your phone now? If you're an adherent.
You have all the apps you can order.
Okay. Prior resolutions limited menu board operations. I'd like to know what the proposed hours are with this application. It wasn't mentioned, silent. I note that a prior application was denied on this site and another granted, but disallowing a menu board enunciator at all. At that time, it was the person has to get out of the car and say quietly, I want, don't they make square hamburger? I want a square hamburger.
They make square hamburgers.
White Castle.
Sliders.
White Castle, yuck.
Oh, they make tiny
the
ones?
tiny
Oh, now they do sliders. Okay, I'm very dated. The last time I was at a White Castle was when they made them square.
They are still.
They are square.
Square.
But they were normal size. They weren't sliders.
No, you can.
Now they're
still
little
square,
bitty. Okay.
Put little onions on them.
More
healthy.
more healthy or more bread. These, also, there are blurry, overdrawn drawings on top of existing plans, this is the second time I've seen that by one of the applicants. They need to stop doing that. You can't use that. Drop out the existing drawings from behind, put that in a different layer, and
that
then drop
ghosting?
it off.
Is that ghosting?
Yeah. think so. Okay.
I had a question. This is because I probably made this mistake when I went to the site. Yes, that's my photographs are confirming that. So, per Z003, it seems the Northern Boulevard curb cut is used for both for entrance and exit, and the curb cut on 88th Street is only for exit. When I went to the site, I actually used the 88th Street site as an entrance because I did not see any sign. If that is not the intention, then there needs to be a clear signage that needs to be provided.
Oh, are you sure it's that one and not, it is this one also, because it's the
next
second
one?
one too?
No, it's this one also.
Yeah,
This is
okay.
another, that's why I looked at the photo
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
took, because I just want to make sure
So that
how.
was my note about the second one.
Yeah, same thing, I had the same issue with the second one also. But, so if it is, 88th Street curb cut is not meant for entrance, there should be a signage. I did not see any, and I wasn't paying attention. I don't know which one.
Anything else?
No, and with regards to the menu board, I definitely, the solution would be to have a Custa fence along that residential frontage.
We don't want to promote any products. Acoustical fence.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
And the greening in the rear is little sparse, especially by the menu board, as per my photographs, I'm looking at them, so there could be more greenery put along the menu board. That may also absorb some of the sound. That's the place that has most amount of the landscape area, so why not green it and see if that can also
Yes.
reduce some of the noise.
Right. I mean, that's part of the problem with the site. There's no shrub, no vegetation right up against the residential. Actually, in reading the old resolutions, where in fact it was denied, that was the principal problem, that they couldn't figure out a circulation plan that would not impose too heavily on the residents. And this one seemed to have been something the board was then willing to accept, but you still see that it imposes on the resident. Anybody else?
Item number 5, 2019-158 BZ, 8903 57th Avenue, Queens. This is also White Castle.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board 3, again, hasn't yet met on this because they apparently took off for the summer when it was filed in May. Photos show 3 overflowing dumpsters outside of the enclosure and parked along the residential property line. So my first reaction was, you need a bigger enclosure and they need to be stored there. But the second is, you're supposed to be picking up the trash every day on these kinds of sites. We don't see this on most of these eating, drinking places. So it's far too much decaying trash in one place. The approved drawings actually show the enclosure was to include a compactor. So I would say provide the compactor. That way you don't have overflowing trash. So provide the compactor. There's also these trash cans on the site that we're not normally seeing being a problem, but these are kind of open and rifled through by whoever rifles through trash cans. Also, is the 10 reservoir spaces aren't really all lined up. One comes in from driving through the exit. Is that really the way reservoir spaces are supposed to work? Because that then clogs up the parking lot. I thought they're supposed to enter one way, exit the other. Anyway.
No, we have seen, I think, a few
And lay-by
we have
space.
seen a few cases of reservoir spaces where there are 2 lanes that are merging into one.
Yeah, the Bronx case, the Bronx McDonald's on Boston Road was
Yeah.
like that.
Okay.
Do you want the open trash cans removed?
Can I say something about this site? This is at a very busy intersection with a lot of commercial establishments along this busy corridor of Queens Boulevard. So would like to hear from the applicant why those trash cans, especially along the property line, has been provided, because the people are walking and they're just throwing stuff around, and I think this is to help people from cluttering the space and providing some
Okay.
public trash cans, which is
Yeah.
not provided by the city, but the private, I think, because I've been by that area, and it is extremely busily used. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic, especially on weekends, shopping, and people are just rushing through, and so that may be the reason, but if that is so, then maybe it can be nicely located.
Yeah.
And maybe belted or tied to the ground so that it doesn't move around.
Right, maybe that's what it is, you know, for instance, some operators, like I think it's McDonald's, they have these very heavy trash can structures that are almost like a stone thing that becomes part of the landscaping, right? It sits between the bushes, so it's not all about the trash can. And so I think that's part of the problem with this. The trash can is something that you would like buy at Home Depot, and then they just put it out there, and it's not maintained. So if it were a piece of instead furniture, you know, site furniture, that belongs there, looks like it fits, then we probably wouldn't have even noticed it. It's just that it does look like a badly maintained temporary thing. So maybe that's the,
It matches the blue color of White Castle.
okay, well then maybe they need it to be a different material, it's just plastic. So, also there, I didn't understand why that curb cut, so that goes to what you were raising on the other one, why the curb cut from Queens Boulevard is two ways, which encourages that kind of travel through the parking lot, which then goes to the same question about the reservoir space, right? So the reservoir, you would get 10 cars, you would get 10 reservoir spaces if it went straight. So, and then you would have people being, I think, there's a pass-by lane, which allows you to park in those spaces if you entered from 57th, right? So I'm just not really, because, I don't know.
I made the mistake of driving into the White Castle. That wasn't the mistake, but from 57th Avenue, and I took a left turn to get to the parking lot area, and I drove out onto Queens Boulevard. After I did that, I realized that that's not, just as a driver, I felt that was not a safe movement. Because if vehicles are coming in and there are vehicles exiting from drive-by, that is creating a pinch point. So, and looking at the plan, it seems to indicate that is not, that I shouldn't have done that. So.
That it's one way
It is
into
one
the
way
parking lot.
into the parking lot, so I think there needs to be much clearer signage.
Designation,
I hope I won't get ticketed for all these wrong. I was merely testing out these possibilities.
And also, if you look at the way the parking spaces are laid out, they are intended for you to access from Queens
Exactly.
Boulevard, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, you can't really get into them without a lot of backing up.
So I think you get more vehicular traffic off Queens Boulevard and more pedestrian traffic, both Queens and 57. I would say also same vehicular traffic from 57 because you have JCPenney and vehicles are coming out.
Right.
There's parking there, yeah.
Okay. All right, other comments were landscaping looks a little sad. They need to replace the dead shrubbery and properly trim, in other words, maintain the shrubs, not just let them grow however. They need to check the lumen levels that exceed 0 on the residential property. There's miscellaneous signage on the fences not shown on the signage calculation drawings. There's also a banner here and there. They need to provide information again on the menu board enunciator and its hours of operation. As in the other, the residents adjacent should not have to live under closed window conditions. They need to provide suitable sound attenuation and show the sound projection in section as well as in plan, and somehow or other deal with a menu board that's audible 16 feet away at very high levels. And also, the prior resolutions required a right-hand turn only sign at 57th Avenue, which is, I don't know if it's provided.
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, so that was one of the requirements from an older resolution, which carried forward on all of the resolutions. And then again, these blurry overdrawings on top of the existing plans you can't do, so provide a clean set without that.
No such signage has been
No
provided
sign,
for right
okay.
turn, yeah.
Anybody else?
Item number 6, 2019 6BZ, 138 East 39th Street. This is the Eastern Prelacy of the Armenian Apostolic Church.
We have proof of service of initial applications to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends conditional approval, preferring a term of 5 years to allow for community feedback in the future.
That was a mistake.
Mistake.
Yeah,
What do you mean it's a mistake?
There's 2 community board recommendations
Oh.
in there.
They were the same date.
No, there was one, it was a later date, like
Oh,
May, and I think
okay.
the first one was like March or something.
So what does it say?
They look almost exactly the same, but when you read it, that, they thought it was a PCE, I guess, or something. That's like standard language they have for
Oh.
PCEs. So then when they re-looked at it, I guess I called and asked
Okay,
them.
so then it isn't that, what did they say then?
They
It
said
just
they don't have any
approved. Okay.
comments, yeah. It's just,
Okay.
Was there a vote?
yeah, you see the vote on the vote sheet. It's just when they checked off the approved modifications, that's an error.
Okay. Anyway, so, okay, so then my comment about that, about how every application here has to comply and can come back for a compliance hearing, so you don't need a term. Everything is sort of subject to a term if they don't comply. This is a small ask, but I'm trying to understand the house of worship aspect, which is where the Cornell deference doctrine fits in. When I look at the floor plan, I see offices at the first floor, one 74-person chapel with accessory spaces at the second floor, library and study rooms at the third floor, what looks like a generous one-bedroom apartment with full bath and kitchen at the fourth floor, and another 3-bedroom apartment with full bath and kitchen at the fifth floor. To avoid getting into those uses, that may or may not be okay with Department of Buildings and may or may not be viewed as accessory to a house of worship, the FAR waiver should be eliminated, since the ask is only 0.1 FAR. After that, you just have the rear yard obstruction at the second floor for the chapel space. But then I ask, why not flip the uses as is typical? Agrees Commissioner Otley Brown. Put the chapel on the first floor for ease of access by the congregation, library on the second floor, and offices above that comply, right? Don't require any setback waivers. So, yeah. They should provide the elevations in NAVD 88 on the sections, and the sections call all the floors out as existing, but the statement of fact says this is to be a gut renovation, so correct the drawing. And I didn't find any visuals to support the contention that the rear yard obstruction won't negatively impact adjoining properties. Although the statement of facts went through it systematically, it needs to be backed up with visual. So please.
I had some comments. Zoning chart indicates 100% lot coverage. Since up to the height of 23 feet is permitted in the rear yard, the full lot coverage in the rear yard is permitted, granted that this is 23 feet or 1 story, whichever, so I think it needs to be.
No, so it isn't, it doesn't comply with the lot coverage because it's 23 feet in 1 story, right?
Okay, so
it's the
from that point
thing
of
that is
view.
now the first floor? 'cause
No,
they're
no, I
raising-
understand
Yeah,
that.
is the 1 story, it's the second floor
So-
that doesn't comply.
Okay, so you're basically, because it's 2 stories, therefore we are saying it's not complying.
Yes,
But
that's.
for the fact of the
That's
23
DOB.
feet. That's DOB,
standard
okay.
thing, yeah. Which is one reason, not really the reason, because no matter what it actually might comply. If they flipped it,
It would.
it would comply
Yeah.
at the chapel level or the worship space level.
But then they'd have to arrange the offices upstairs so that they were not within those
Yes.
30 feet.
Correct.
And also the library, I think, on
Yes.
the floor above, which is
Is also-
part of the way into the 30
Yes.
feet.
And whether they could justify, as we sometimes see with houses of worship, that a library, which houses the religious books and so on, and are consulted by congregants, they might be able to justify a library waiver, but not administrative offices and an apartment for lots of people to stay in. I just don't see that part. I mean, we do occasionally, of course, have an apartment associated with a house of worship, but this is mostly, there's 2 floors of apartments here.
Well, it just seems that this is also very light on programmatic needs details. We
right.
don't know anything about how this functions.
Right.
I don't want to cut into the vice chair any more than that, than just,
No, that's okay. The description of the existing use in the statement of findings does not match the existing plan.
Sorry, say that one more time?
The description of the existing use does not match that that's in the statement of fact, especially with regards to the 3rd floor.
Sorry, the description of the existing use where, on the plans?
Yeah, it's in the plans, every room is
On
marked.
the plans, oh.
But that doesn't seem to match what's written in the statement of facts. With regards to the... Okay, the statement of fact states rear yard waiver is of 30 feet on first floor and 15 feet on second floor. A waiver of 30 feet is required on the first floor, which is no, again, the statement needs to refer to the 30. No, I'm sorry, it was one side. I should have deleted that. With regards to the findings, I wanted a little bit more clarification as to the number of congregants, the kind of daily activities that is scheduled for the multipurpose room. They need to elaborate the shortcoming of the existing multipurpose room, how many students in the seminary program, and do they all stay on the site? And the resident that is proposed for His Holiness, is that a permanent resident or is it a temporary? And these are all leading to the question is, does some of the spaces for which the waivers are being requested can be accommodated on the upper floors and eliminate and can reduce some of the waiver requirements? And also in the plan, both in the existing and the proposed, do indicate the building height and the rear yard, the 23 foot.
So I feel that they need to give us more information on the programmatic needs, as was said before me. And I think that they should discuss whether or not they can actually relocate the multipurpose room to the lowest floor, especially since this is undergoing a gut renovation. So it's not really like everything has to stay in the same place. And then use the fact that they could extend to the rear lot line, if it's needed, up to 23 feet, because the offices you can relocate everywhere else. I think they need to talk about how many people actually gather in that multipurpose room and how often and for what use. They need to talk about how many seminarians there are, so that we know whether or not that seminarian space is suitable or even too large. And they need to talk about His Holiness's quarters and what is His Holiness's purpose as regards this entire building / congregation or school.
Any others? Other comment?
Nothing further.
No? Okay.
Secret? It's type 2, that's right, okay. This concludes the public review session for September 16, 2019.